The next morning, the three of them were called in for tea. Leo groaned loudly, feeling frustrated. Oh my gosh, why did Professor Ludger have to catch us like this? Tessie felt regretful about her thoughtless actions. She glanced at Aiden, her face full of emotions. The principal walked in and said, "You've been waiting a long time, haven't you?" The three of them sat frozen, startled, and quickly stood up when they saw the principal had arrived. She told them, "Please, just sit comfortably." This was bad. The fact that the principal was here in person probably meant this was a serious punishment. Ludger spoke up and asked, "Do you three know why you were called here?" Leo replied, "Probably because we're being punished for what we did." The principal nodded. "That's right. You need to understand the seriousness of what happened yesterday. Even the smallest mistake could have cost you your lives." She tried to comfort them. "You don't have to feel so down." And Ludger, "Please stop scaring them like that." Ludger firmly said, "This can't be treated lightly." The principal smiled. "It's over now. The kids have already explained everything in detail." She turned to Aiden and said, "I heard you risked your life to save Tessie. You probably realize by now that your actions weren't the best. So I'll deduct 10 points from each of you as a penalty, but I won't criticize you too harshly. Instead, I've decided to award you 20 points as a reward." The three kids couldn't believe their eyes. She asked, "Ludger, you don't have any objections, right?" Ludger stood beside her, and when he heard that, he didn't say anything more. It was her decision, and he wasn't going to intervene. She reminded them, "Well, make sure to keep working hard in the future." The three kids all thanked her at once before leaving. As Aiden passed by Professor Ludger, it seemed like he wanted to say something. The principal turned to Professor Ludger and asked, "Are you satisfied now?" Ludger replied, "I didn't expect you to play the role of the good guy in front of the kids." He thanked her, saying that if the kids knew his true intentions, it wouldn't have fit with his usual cold demeanor. "Better leave it to you, principal." The principal understood what he meant, but she was still curious. Was there anything unusual about those two werewolves? Ludger answered that no matter how much he thought about it, he hadn't noticed anything strange. The principal smiled and thanked him. "Thanks to you, there were no casualties or losses. I'm really looking forward to your future achievements, Professor." After saying that, she went off to handle her own work. Now Ludger was left alone in the empty room, silent and still. He sat, lost in thought, reflecting on what had happened the night before. He remembered the moments clearly, the werewolf charging toward its mother. Its body was covered with leaves, clearly indicating that behind that form was still a human, not yet fully transformed into a werewolf. Those crazy people, they don't create werewolves from wolves. They captured humans and turned them into werewolves. He didn't regret the decision he made back then. If he had let them go, he would have been the one in danger. Besides, they were harming others too. They had to face the consequences of their actions, even though he didn't want things to end that way. Ludger sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he took out his communication device and called Han. He said he had a proposal. Meanwhile, Leo, Aiden, and Tessie sat nearby, quietly passing time. Tessie asked Leo how his body was feeling, and Leo replied, "Still fine, no problem." He added, "I'm good, just need some rest to recover." Looking over at Aiden, Ludger noticed his face still seemed troubled. Tessie asked Aiden, "Something on your mind?" Aiden replied, "Not exactly, but do you remember those two werewolves? There was something strange around their necks. The reason I stopped Ludger earlier was because I wondered if they were artificially created." When Leo heard the word artificial, he immediately thought of the group of people hiding in Ceoren who might be involved in this. Tessie asked, "Is Aiden suspicious of Professor Ludger?" Aiden replied, "I don't want to be suspicious either, but Ludger's expression was a bit strange. When I think back to that day, he definitely saw something." Tessie asked, "So, does Professor Ludger have something he's hiding?" Aiden thought to himself, asterisk, he only did it because he's a professor at Ceoren. But what if my suspicions are right? There's no reason for a Ceoren professor to act like that. What if he's involved in those rumors after all, asterisk? Tessie stood up and said, "Leo and Aiden, stop talking. Don't you remember what the principal said? She said he explained everything. If he were like that, he wouldn't be able to do what he's doing for Ceoren. On the outside, it might seem different, but he really cares about us. And you two are going to doubt him." After Tessie spoke, both Leo and Aiden started to think things through. Aiden said, "I'm hungry. Let's go have lunch." Tessie, surprised, asked again, "What? Are you serious?" Aiden replied, "Only your friend would ask me to go eat." He then added, "Aren't we already friends?" Tessie felt both embarrassed and really happy. Then the three of them went out to eat together. Even though Tessie seemed to enjoy it, she only said she was going because she didn't want to refuse. It was a bit awkward to watch. Back with Ludger, Han asked, "Have you looked at the documents they sent?" Ludger had already gone over the list of missing people. Han mentioned that a lot of people had been traveling around a nearby abandoned factory. "I'm guessing that's where they're doing their experiments. I'll also check the information you asked me to find," Han added, "about the workers who left the city recently." Ludger asked, Is it our family of 3 involved? Han confirmed. Yes, there's one case where a family of 3 disappeared together. Ludger said he understood and would head there soon. The scene shifts to an abandoned factory. In front of it, 2 guards were standing watch. One of them said, "My legs are going numb from standing here so long. I don't know how much longer we have to stay." The other guard replied, 2 more days and we'll be free soon." But how did those werewolves manage to escape? The kid didn't have enough of the sedative, so they forced another shot into him and he kept screaming. Things got chaotic when the kid's parents tried to take him, and it all turned into a mess. The person next to me casually said, "So your parents turned into werewolves, and you still care about your kid? They were the ones who caused all this chaos and then escaped. But now everything's like this because of that kid." While we were chatting, the 2 guys heard a noise near the gate. They exchanged a cautious look and quickly drew their guns. But before they could do anything, 2 bullets pierced their heads without them even noticing, and they both collapsed right where they stood. A mysterious figure in a cloak walked in. That gaze, it could only be Professor Ludger. An hour earlier, Han had asked Ludger, "You're going alone." Ludger had replied, "You want to come along?" Han said, "I can take out a few of them. You must be bored. How about I go alone and check how many there are?" "Where are they?" Ludger responded, "Around 40 of them. They're about to leave, so if you're late by even a few days, it'll all be for nothing. You better be ready, though. Everyone's armed. 2 of them have resistance to magic, and there are 2 witches, too. You can go through the drainage pipe if you want. Just be careful, bro." Before leaving, Ludger now asked Han about the situation with the 3 people's family. "How old is the child?" Han paused and then replied, "The child is only 7 years old. He's still very young." Ludger, recalling the memory, couldn't help but exclaim, "Those bastards." As they moved further inside, the sound of gunshots and desperate screams echoed through the air. The people present were lying dead all over the floor, with blood everywhere. Behind Ludger, a strange bee had been flying around his back the entire time. Inside, the others were busy packing up their things. A guy with blonde hair and another one with a shaved head were watching. When they noticed a mouse had entered, a shaved head guy thought it was one of the security team and ordered everyone to stop. The blonde guy quickly said, "It's not. He's not one of the security team." Meanwhile, the brood with guns kept firing, but no bullets were coming out. They began to panic. Ludger had blocked all the bullets. One of them said, "You're an idiot. You'll die by our swords." Just as he finished boasting, before he could even try to show off, he was struck by a bullet to the head. Ludger now said, "Stop being so full of yourself, got it?" The other men standing nearby saw their comrade go down like that and thought that Ludger's bullets were magic spells. A heavy, ironclad footstep sounded as someone stepped forward and told the others to move aside. "No matter how strong you are, one of my bullets will send you straight to the afterlife." After saying that, he fired his massive cannon at Ludger and asked, "How does that feel?" Weighing his eyes, he's been hit by a reverse skill. Ludger easily blocked the bullet with his bare hands. The man realized his attack was based on metal and alchemy. He cursed under his breath. His electrical power is insanely strong. "There's no way I can fight back." Suddenly, a burst of light hit the vial behind the armored man. He turned around, startled by the unexpected turn of events. A loud explosion followed by a scream rang out, with smoke and dust filling the air. Counting quickly, Ludger saw he'd taken out 20 of them, leaving 20 more to deal with. As he was counting, Ludger turned and shot down the insect that had been spying on him. He thought to himself, surveillance through insects? Could they be related to them? They're pretty famous in the underworld. Looks like they're preparing a welcome gift for me. Ludger stepped forward, and with it, a wave of magic surged, causing the bees that had been following him to scatter and fall to the ground. The blond man noticed immediately that the tracking signal had been cut off. He felt a magical disturbance in the air, wind magic. He used both wind and metal magic himself. This could get complicated. "Get the big ones ready," he muttered. Varen prepared to move. The man with the shaved head was getting ready for action. The people in the hall focused on the map. He would definitely come here. Let's make sure to welcome him when he does. Suddenly, the lights went out and the whole room was plunged into darkness. "Maybe he's just messing with us," one of them said. They waited, but no one said anything. Turning around, it was clear that the man couldn't speak anymore. The blond man stood frozen for a moment, then shouted, "Damn it!" He snuck in and turned off all the lights. A centipede crawled out of his sleeve. The blond man noticed a shadow charging toward him. Ludger swung his staff to strike, but the man managed to dodge the attack, clearly lucky to escape it. He shouted, "Keep your distance, no matter what." It was all carefully calculated. But then, out of nowhere, Ludger unleashed fire magic, and the blond man flinched, his face pale as he gasped. How can he cast that quickly? How is this possible? The fire from Ludger's spell burned the man. The blond man, emerging from the flames, stared intently at Ludger and said, "Damn it, where the hell are you demons coming from?" Ludger did respond, maintaining his calm demeanor. The gun in his hand was aimed directly at the man's head. "I'll send you all to meet death quickly," he said. Ludger glanced at their underlings. Each one looked like they had already drained of blood. Suddenly, Ludger was blindsided by a massive kick. It came from the bald man, though now there was no bald head to speak of. His body had started to transform. His arm opened up into a mouth that grinned wickedly as it asked Ludger, surprised, "I didn't think it would come to this. You've killed too many of my brothers already." Ludger scoffed, "You look pretty ugly now, and I didn't expect you to survive this long. You're like a damn leech." The bald man's body continued to change. His mouth kept talking, explaining, "My body has evolved beyond that of a human." A massive shadow blocked Ludger's path. The creature spoke, "I know more of my brother's death. I will tear you apart into 1,000 pieces to pay for it." Tension built up as everyone screamed and watched the fierce attack unfold. The monster hurled weapons, sending everyone flying in all directions. Ludger asked the monster, "Aren't you worried about your subordinates at all? If you care so much about them, then just stand still." With that, he launched another attack at it. He stepped back, squeezing the trigger to fire 2 more shots, aiming straight at the monster's head. The creature went wild, swinging its huge scorpion tail to knock him back. He staggered but quickly cast a spell. A powerful surge of magic erupted, sending a huge red light directly at the monster, forcing it to slither away to avoid the hit. This caught him off guard, and he muttered. It dodged that with its massive body. He kept falling back, but his hand never stopped channeling magic. The giant creature, with its metallic armor and eyes sparking with fury, let out heavy, angry breaths. Ludger thought to himself, "I can't believe it's still standing after taking that spell head-on." The monster began to fight back, taunting him, "If you want to roast me, at least use a 4th tier spell." It swung its claws at him, but just then, a massive explosion shook the air, followed by thick white smoke. The monster paused, stunned, looking around. Ludger had vanished without a trace, leaving only destruction behind. It stared in disbelief and exclaimed, "He's gone. What is happening?" Suddenly, he appeared out of nowhere behind the monster. He exclaimed, "You're pretty fast, aren't you? Like a winged bug." He thought there was no way he could use any magic against him, but he knew there was no choice left. "It's over," he muttered. Outside, Han was waiting for him. After a moment of wandering thoughts, he noticed a flash of light, sparks flying from the spot where the other was. "What kind of magic is this?" "It's just magic," he said, scratching his head. He knew exactly who the other person was. A short while later, he returned to Han and told him that everything was taken care of. He had also figured out who was funding the drug that turned people into wolves. Han was surprised, but didn't say anything further. He simply left. At Bellabot's house, the old man was yelling at the servants. It seemed like he was more angry about his inhumane experiment than anything else. The man thought that the experiment would make him younger and stronger, had never left his mind. Suddenly, the man appeared and knocked him down. Panicked, Bellabot called for the guards, but it was useless. The room had already been soundproofed by the other. He asked the old man a question. "There's a 7-year-old boy who should have survived, but the harsh reality is when his parents had to become monsters, he smiled at the person about to kill him. He smiled as if he were grateful for it. How do you think you would feel if you were in his shoes? What do you think that person felt?" The old man just laughed and said, "So, you're the one who dealt with those test subjects. Let go of me and let's talk." But he made the old man answer. The old man kept laughing as if to confirm his own answer and smugly said, "You're worried because you killed those test subjects, huh? Don't worry about it. Who cares if you killed a few of those little pests? We gave them a chance to add some value to their useless lives. This opportunity has contributed to the advancement of humanity. Wasn't that a noble sacrifice?" As he listened, his face darkened. He exhaled slowly and said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. That answer is enough." He shot a syringe full of bright red serum straight into the old man's neck. The old man's eyes widened in fear. He stared at him as he coldly said, "That answer was enough that I'm not even angry anymore." After being injected, the old man collapsed to the ground, glaring up at Ludger while shouting, "You bastard, what have you done to me?" Ludger calmly replied, "I read the report in the lab. It's quite fascinating. A drug that can turn a person into a werewolf with just a small dose. And then I had this question. What would happen if I used the entire bottle?" The old man started to writhe in agony, his eyes rolling back, screaming, and then transforming into a terrifying monster. Ludger stood there, watching, thinking to himself, I can understand his emotions, a deep primal fear coming from within his soul. Because of that, one should also understand the fear of others that you've caused. Then he used magic and disappeared. Moments later, the hurried footsteps of the guards echoed through the hallway. What was that noise? It came from Lord Bellabot's room. When they opened the door, they screamed, "Lord Bellabot." But before them stood a monster. They screamed in terror, "A monster! Where did this thing come from?" "Take it down first. If you can't use magic, find Lord Belfour right away. Then they split into two groups. One group fought the monster, while the other went to find the old man. They couldn't defeat the monster immediately. As they fought, they yelled out, "This is insane. Damn it, is it still alive? Don't stop, we need to use all our mana. Increase the firepower." Cut to the hideout. Hen was surprised by what Ludger brought back. "Wow, what is this?" Ludger replied, "Take as much as you need and use it for your work." He then hid it carefully. Han asked him, "It took a lot of effort to find this hideout. Why don't you take a look around?" Ludger, walking away, answered, "Maybe next time. I'll be back anyway. By then, I'll use a different identity that fits better with this underground world." Han didn't understand and simply said, "Okay, then you rest." With that, Ludger walked outside. He went to the riverbank, clenched his fists, and stared into the distance. The next morning, a large group of reporters gathered right outside the mansion's gate. They were in disbelief, shouting, "Really? The billionaire Rickson, he was eaten by a monster?" By the time security arrived, there was no sign of Rickson, only the monster left behind. It seemed the rumors that Rickson had used forbidden magic were true after all. Another reporter asked, "What about the monster?" The other person replied, "I heard that the magical security team took care of it. They said it took over an hour to destroy the beast." Suddenly, a newcomer caught the attention of the reporters. It was a person with long white hair walking by. They quickly realized it was the security team, along with the Dark Knight squad. The leader of the group was Sir Torrena Lionhowl, the captain of the Knights. The reporters quickly took photos and said in surprise, "I didn't think that National Security Team would get involved in this. Could it be that serious? This news is important. We should report that the Knights are working with National Security to investigate the case." Torrena walked up to the gatekeeper and ordered, "Open the gate." The gatekeeper hesitated, saying, I was ordered not to let anyone in." She gave a stern look and commanded again, "Open the gate." At this point, the gatekeeper, now frightened, opened the gate. She and the Knights entered and met with Inspector Teberin. He saluted, saying, "Captain Torrena, it's an honor to meet you. I'm Inspector Teberin." She responded, "All right, you did well. From now on, National Security will take over the investigation. You should hand over all the documents and evidence you gathered and leave." The inspector hesitated. "You mean the security team?" "I understand." He then gave an order to his subordinates. "Let's go, everyone retreat. Inya, a member of the Knights squad, sighed at relief. The tension in the air is really something." Lloyd, standing beside her, teased, "Hey, Inya, you're losing your dignity here." She responded, "Come on, Lloyd, we don't need to worry about our dignity when no one's watching." He shot back, "Even if no one's around, everything should still be the same. You should act properly, like a member of the Dark Knight squad." Captain Torrena intervened, "Enough, Lloyd. As long as the media doesn't see us doing anything wrong, that's all that matters. Don't forget why we're here." They both answered in unison, "Yes." They turned to look at the monster. Captain Torrena assessed it. "So this is the monster? Disgusting." Bellabot was rumored to have been involved not just with forbidden magic, but also with dark arts. So hearing that he was killed by a monster, this is no ordinary case. Lloyd continued, "The monster appeared, Rickson was killed. That's what the witnesses said. Then Inya analyzed, the monster's body makes sense now. Just by looking at it, you can tell it was burned down to the bone. There's no way we can identify the body. Let's take a look around the room." The three of them spread out to examine the room. Torrena looked at the painting on the wall and noticed a small mark on it. It wasn't burned. She touched the painting and suddenly a hidden door opened, revealing a secret room. Lloyd was surprised. "Oh, a secret room?" she said, "but there's nothing here." Looking at the size and position of the space, it definitely seemed like the perfect spot to hide a safe. Inya asked, "A safe?" Lloyd turned to her and explained Bellabot Rickson was known as a tycoon involved in shady dealings, so it's no surprise he had many secrets. Torrena added, "Right, he used to hide documents in places only he knew about. There has to be a safe here, probably out. Until last night." She thought to herself, "It's clear there are still traces of the safe here. It must have just been moved. The mysterious death of the billionaire, the appearance of the monster, and the missing safe. This can't just be a coincidence. We can only conclude that someone interfered with Bellabot's death. But what could their goal be if they're trying so hard to cover it up? The only person I know who could have skills like this is," and an image of a mysterious figure popped into her mind. She whispered the name, Arsene Lupin. Lloyd, noticing her reaction, asked, "What's that?" She replied, "Nothing. By the way, have there been any strange cases in Red Herbalife recently?" He answered, "There was one. A factory that's been abandoned for a while has been set on fire. It actually happened not long before Bellabot's death last night." She responded confidently, "Then there's probably something connected to that. Let's go." Ludger sat in the room holding his head and thinking, "Suck! The aftermath of this is definitely not something to take lightly. That magic consumes so much mana, just breathing could spread it. Luckily, I prepared some medicine in advance, or this could have been a huge problem. After taking the medicine, he sighed in relief and said, I feel better now. Ludger's face was lost in thought. I've turned those werewolves to ash and destroyed all the evidence. At least for now, I don't have to worry about the werewolves anymore. Wait, no, there's still one person left. Aiden. He was the one who kept stopping me. While I was dealing with the werewolves, he was the one closest to me at that moment. Even though I destroyed the evidence right away, just for a second, he must have seen something. Damn it, I never thought things would turn out like this. Who can guarantee he won't go tell Lynn about it? If he does, the best option might be, I just kill him. As he thought this, he remembered Aiden's words. Don't worry, I won't kill you, teacher. Remembering that, he clenched his fist. No, going after a student is too risky. Besides, Aiden is a special case. He's being closely watched by the principal. If anything happens to him, I'll be in the principal's sights. For now, I should just rest. With that, he lay down, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Thinking it over again, Aiden had known since he was young that he had learned a special kind of magic from a wandering mage. Could that be a coincidence? Meanwhile, the Dark Knight squad stood in front of the burned-down factory. Tarina, with one hand on her hip, said, I knew it would turn out like this. Inya stood behind watching, then said, everything is destroyed. Lloyd spoke up too. With the way things are, it's going to be hard to investigate. Tarina, worried, spoke while walking. Why would an abandoned factory suddenly catch fire? And why did it happen at the same time as Bellabot's death? Lloyd shared his thoughts. Maybe the factory was still in operation, it just looked abandoned. Tarina replied, still concerned, I think you're right. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caught fire on its own. Inya offered her idea. Could it be that dark wizards and sorcerers were discovered while scouting the place, and they set the fire to cover their tracks? Tarina thought for a moment, then responded, that makes sense, but we still don't know who discovered them. After saying that, she sank into deep thought. She hadn't planned any investigation for this place. Could they have gone to such lengths to hide evidence from someone? Or was it just a coincidence? Or maybe there were other reasons entirely? Tarina turned to Lloyd and asked, aside from this, is there anything else recently that's worth noting? Lloyd answered, nothing major, but a werewolf caused a disturbance a few days ago. It's now been spotted at Ceoren Academy. Hearing that, she asked, Ceoren Academy? Lloyd replied, yes, according to the report, it entered through the sewer system. Tarina, worried, stroked her chin and said, security there has always been weak, so it's not really surprising. But are the students safe? What happened to the werewolf? Lloyd answered, 3 students were injured, but the werewolf has been dealt with. A professor there took care of it. Tarina, still worried, asked, as expected of a professor from Ceoren, having disposed of the werewolf's body? Lloyd replied, there's no body left. It was completely burned. At this, Tarina emphasized the words burned and glanced around. Noticing this, Lloyd asked, are you trying to confirm something? Do we need to go to Ceoren? Tarina replied anxiously, no, need to focus on gathering evidence first. Lloyd simply answered, understood. Then the group split up. Tarina stood still, deep in thought, worried. A factory and a werewolf, both burned. It might seem a bit far-fetched to link these 2 incidents, but I won't rule out the possibility. Every threat to the kingdom must be eradicated at its root. That's our duty as Nightcrawler Knights. In the lecture hall, students were constantly whispering to each other. Did Professor Ludger really take down the werewolf? He came from the military and was even involved in the campaign against sorcerers. I knew from the start that he wasn't someone to mess with. Lynn picked up her books and looked around for a seat. She quietly wondered where she should sit. There was a space in the middle, but it seemed like no one was willing to move aside. After everything that happened, everyone had been avoiding her. Ah, there's an empty spot outside. Arinder von Exilian waved at her with a friendly smile and said, hey there, how's it going? Lynn walked over to the seat, replying with a simple hi. Inside, though, she was silently crying. Asterisk, am I really sitting next to the princess? Asterisk. The students began gossiping again. Oh my gosh, she's sitting next to the princess and they're acting so friendly with each other. When did they become so close? Lay recalled the scene from that evening. While Ludger was fighting the werewolf, the 2 of them had a conversation. Lynn, worried, had asked, is Professor Ludger okay? Aiden von Exilian had reassured her. Don't worry, he's Professor Ceoren. By the way, why are you still out here so late? Lynn shared her story with the princess. So, here's what happened. Arinder von Exilian, clearly upset, said, what? No one woke you up? That's outrageous. I should teach that librarian a lesson. Lynn quickly interrupted. It's okay, I just accidentally overslept. But wait, princess, what are you doing here? Arinder von Exilian replied, oh, I was just outside bringing the students into the dorm. Lynn, surprised, asked, the princess herself did that? Arender von Exilian smiled warmly and said, "You can just call me senior. Here, everyone is equal, right?" At this, Lynn fell deep into thought. I can't believe even the princess has to patrol the grounds and casually chat with someone like me. But sitting next to her makes me nervous. One wrong move and I'm done for. The classroom door opened. Today, Ludger had his hair tied up and stepped up to the podium. He said, "Class is starting." Ludger used magic to send papers to each of the students. He continued, "Today, I'll be teaching about manifestation traits, the basic principles, and the rules of attribute elements. Attribute elements are one of the 4 manifestation traits. They are the most common and important, the foundation of everything you've all probably already studied. So today, I'm going to teach you a new method." Flora Luvos picked up the paper and thought, asterisk a new method? What is he planning to do this time, asterisk? Ludger continued, "This method will increase your elemental power from 20% to 80%. Hearing this, the students were intrigued and said, "There's such a method. He wouldn't be lying to us, right?" Ludger suddenly asked, "Anthony, which element can you use?" Startled, Anthony replied, "Water, ice, and wood." Ludger then said, "All right, some of the element you're most confident with." Anthony tensed up and answered, "Yes, sir." With that, a burst of energy appeared from his hand. Ludger watched and commented, "It's acceptable." Anthony quickly responded, "Thank you, sir." Before he could fully enjoy the moment, Ludger added, "What I mean is there's nothing special about it," making Anthony feel down and cry inwardly. Ludger extended his hand and said, "Look closely." As he spoke, a wave of power radiated from his hand, not a small orb like Anthony's, but actual freezing snow. Tessie, watching from below, exclaimed in shock, "What? Is this really the same kind of magic?" Leo, equally amazed, sighed, "This level is on a whole different scale." Ludger spoke up and it seemed like the students were all interested. "Now, I'll explain the theory first." Flora immediately focused her attention on Ludger. In the lecture hall, Ludger continued with his teaching. Because elemental properties have such a long history in the field of manifestation, they were once considered the foundation of all forms of pure magic. They are also a part of manifestation. At that moment, 4 powers appeared in Ludger's hands. He continued, "These are the 4 primary elements. If you compare them to the more than 10 elements we have now, 4 seems like too few and they're quite simple. Now, does anyone know why elemental magic has developed the way it has? I'll give 5 points to anyone who gets it right. Let's use fire as an example." The students all raised their hands and began speaking. "It's because fire is used to drive away darkness." Wrong. Next. "It's used to burn and clear forests." That's too broad. Next. One student emitted a threatening aura. The dark-haired boy said, "It's used to erase the primal fear in humans, darkness." Ludger replied, "I think you'd be great at writing poetry." Another hand shot up. "Yes." Flora Lumos, she answered the question, "To burn and kill people." Ludger nodded. "Exactly." At that moment, all the students began murmuring in amazement. Ludger continued his lesson, burning with fire, drowning in water, cutting with wind, and striking dead with electricity. War and slaughter are the reasons magic developed. However, in the biting cold that seemed to cut through flesh, fire became a symbol of life rather than destruction. Water powered the water wheels, wind turned the windmills, and electricity was used to light the darkness. The purpose of the elements could always change depending on human action. Fighting for a better world. This is the mindset you must have before learning about the elemental properties. Now let's begin the lesson. Everyone, create an elemental sphere. The practical session immediately began. Joseph focused on the flow of magic. Although he was a second-year student, the magical power he produced was surprisingly lacking in experience. Joseph nervously responded, "Yes, sir." Ludger looked at another student and said, "Irina Karoman, you call that an element? It feels like a rotten leaf falling on the ground and late on. Think of it as a young tree just sprouting from the earth." Hearing this, the student regained her composure and replied, "Yes." Tessie was up top, completely focused. Seeing Ludger like that, she thought to herself, he's really strict. Everyone was paying close attention, but only one person remained seated, not practicing at all. Noticing this, Ludger looked at him and thought, Aiden Leo, sitting next to him, turned to Aiden and asked, "What are you doing?" When there was no reply, Ludger became lost in his thoughts. This kid, what's his deal? Is he trying to defy me because of the incident with the werewolves? Aiden, equally worried, thought to himself, "I don't think that's what's going on." Ludger then spoke up, "Don't you have any experience with elemental magic?" Aiden awkwardly replied, "Yeah, I'm not good at it." Ludger scratched his head, frowned, and thought, "So that's it. A student who's lacking. Someone special who doesn't even have the basic knowledge. Even though he's been recognized as special, I'm not responsible for someone who can't even follow basic instructions. Letting him fall behind compared to the rest of the class isn't a big deal." But Ludger spoke again. "Tell me, what elemental attributes can you use?" "You do know that, right?" Aiden answered, yeah, fire, water, and wind. Ludger immediately said, then let's try the fire element. Aiden, confused, asked, excuse me. Ludger explained, I will teach you. I can't just leave a student behind from the start. Focus your magical energy. You should be able to perform the basics, right? Aiden nodded repeatedly. Yes. Ludger moved closer and pointed at his hand. Now think about turning that magic into an element. As I said, fire. Aiden nervously replied, I'll try. Seeing that Aiden still seemed unsure, Ludger added, don't overthink it. Just feel the essence of the fire with all your senses. Aiden shut his eyes tightly, following his teacher's instructions. He focused on the brightest fire he could remember, its shape, sound, smell, and the sensation of it. Everything. Then Aiden sank into a vivid, dreamlike memory. 8 years ago, during a snowstorm, he remembered the bitter smell of wood burning and the scent of charred meat simmering on the stove, the sound of his two sisters arguing and his mother's angry voice, his father's smile when he returned home. There was barely enough food, and the cold winds cut through his worn clothes. It was a harsh winter, but the fire in the kitchen made everything feel better. That warmth was as real to him as if it had happened just yesterday. A voice spoke up exactly. That voice pulled Aiden back to reality. Finally, the flame Aiden had been trying to create ignited. Seeing this, Aiden felt a rush of joy, thinking to himself that he had done it. This feeling brought back memories from his past. Ludger complimented him. Not bad. This flame isn't hot, but it's warm. It doesn't bring destruction. Instead, it gives off a soft, comforting feeling. I can guess what you were thinking. The other students couldn't help but express their surprise. Professor Ludger is actually complimenting someone. Ludger turned to look at Aiden and continued, the flame in your hand is the fire element you envision. Instead of a typical elemental force, it's your own flame, your own magic. Aiden asked in amazement, is this really my own magic? Ludger walked back to the podium, speaking as he moved. Don't forget that feeling. I'm sure you all understand this by now, but the method I'm teaching is just this. Use your own senses based on your personal experiences. The basic knowledge is essential for understanding elemental attributes, but just knowing that fire is hot and ice is cold, that's something even a 3-year-old could understand. A true mage must infuse something special into it. Perform your element by thinking of a special moment in your life and feel the element through all 5 of your senses. When she heard the teacher's words, a student had successfully created her own magic. Everyone was amazed and said, wow, it really works. Yeah, it's so different from before. Flora Lumos sat underneath, resting her chin in her hand, thinking, I already know all of that. I thought the teacher would show me something I didn't know, but there's probably nothing new here. Then why is he going into such detail, teaching the newbies so carefully, and even praising him just for performing one element? She clenched her palm, thinking, where is the person who made me look foolish in front of everyone during the first lesson? I was just trying to do things quietly without drawing attention, but let's see if the teacher won't praise my element. Shaking off the thought, Flora Lumos began casting a spell that combined several elements, shining brightly. The student beside her gasped and said, a stack spell. You can do that now? Flora Lumos didn't respond. She focused on crafting the magic, thinking to herself, if I use wind magic here and create a whirlpool. Suddenly, the vortex spiraled out of Flora's control. Everyone became worried and turned their eyes toward her. Flora, isn't this too dangerous? Flora, stop. Flora was just as worried about herself. If this continued, it would explode. She had to stop it. She even at least a barrier to keep everyone around her safe. Seeing this, the people around her quickly ran off. Run, quickly hide. Flora struggled against the power she had created. Then, a soft voice gently soothed her. Focus, Flora Lumos. Don't give up. Control your magic. I'll help you. One speaking was Ludger. When he touched the magic and felt that it was more stable, he said, stay focused, it's not over yet. If you stop now, your magic will vanish and you won't have achieved anything. You understand that, right? Flora became more serious. Yes, that's right. I've come this far and I will finish it. There were always 2 types of gazes directed at Flora Lumos, admiration and envy. She had never paid attention to those looks, let alone let them affect her. Actually, the most frustrating thing she had to endure was the cold, harsh gaze of her father, who always looked down on her and treated her like a child. Along with the feeling of failure she experienced that day, when she was penalized 10 points because of the shame she had to face, she was reminded of childhood memories she wished she could forget. That day, she turned around and couldn't see Ludger's face, but she was certain he had looked at her with contempt, just like her father did. Moreover, the Lumos family never forgets a grudge. On top of that, with her incredibly high sense of pride, Flora couldn't shake the feeling that one day she would defeat this teacher. After Flora focused her mind, the green light finally appeared. Things that had been out of place slowly returned to normal, and she felt even more motivated to push herself further. A sharp ice crystal had formed. Flora had succeeded. She was overjoyed, but before she could even feel proud of herself, Ludger shot her a disapproving look and scolded her. "So, you done something very naive, Flora Lumos. I don't care if you try a new spell and fail, because everyone fails sometimes. But if you endanger the other students, that's a different matter." Flora felt a bit guilty. Just a moment ago, she had almost lost control if it hadn't been for Ludger's timely help. Ludger continued to criticize her. "On top of your lack of experience mixing the two elements, you mix fire and ice. It's very hard to make two opposing elements work together." Flora could accept what Ludger said earlier because she knew she was in the wrong. But this last comment, she didn't agree with. She stood up, upset, and argued back. "That's true, but I still succeeded. I admit that I intentionally wanted to mix a third element, but when I combined fire and ice, the result was perfect." Ludger knew that no matter how much he explained, the stubborn girl wouldn't listen. He quietly raised his hand and demonstrated the mix of fire and ice himself. He used real results to show the difference between them. Flora's mix only looked good on the surface because the fire had been frozen. Her magic ultimately just ended up as decoration without achieving anything. After witnessing this, Flora realized she had been wrong. She lowered her head, ready to face the next round of criticism. Right at that moment, Ludger transformed the elemental mass in his hand into countless tiny snowflakes. They fell throughout the room, creating a breathtakingly beautiful scene, accompanied by the amazed gasps of the students. In her heart, Flora had to admit that the magic optimized to control fire allowed him to combine the spreading power of fire with the cold of ice into a single spell. He had turned the elements he controlled into something much more useful. She clearly realized she had been outclassed. Her eyes were filled with self-disappointment. However, with all the kindness of a teacher, Ludger told her he wasn't criticizing her for her skill shortcomings. Flora couldn't believe it and had to ask her teacher again. Ludger placed a hand on Flora's shoulder and seriously advised, "You have a very special skill. I've never seen a sorcerer your age with such a technique. Well, what I wonder is much simpler than that. To me, your magic seems like it's just for show. I have no right to interfere with your intentions for using magic, but at least try to find a purpose beyond showing off for your own sake." After speaking, Ludger asked all the students to return to their seats so they could settle down and resume the class. Flora finally understood that the teacher wasn't scolding or looking down on her. He was genuinely concerned. Her father had never looked at her with such a gaze. "He's just reminding you to put your own interests first," he had said. Suddenly, a sharp headache hit, causing Flora to wince in pain. The classmate sitting next to her noticed and immediately asked if she was okay. The excessive use of mana had made Flora dizzy. She felt like she might faint. It made her worry about Ludger. She wondered if he was okay since he seemed to have used up more mana than she had. Ludger, with his back turned to the class, made it hard for anyone to see the discomfort on his face. Sure enough, he was feeling dizzy too. Thankfully, he had taken medicine earlier. Ludger thought to himself, not only can she combine elements at such a young age, but she's also able to combine 3 extremely difficult elements. I got reprimanded by the teacher for showing off like that. He pressed down on her a bit harder. Remembering that moment, does it hurt? He wondered to himself. Still, he hoped she would get through it easily. His advice was never just empty words. Ceoren was right. This new batch of students was filled with talent. Could this really be the golden generation? As Ludger was lost in thought, the image of another student snapped him back to reality. Lynn was struggling hard to summon the elemental, but it kept turning into a thin sphere before shattering, never quite working. Ludger rested his chin on his hand and spoke to Lynn. "So you can't summon the elemental properly. Essentially, that elemental doesn't exist. That's all for today's lesson. We'll skip the usual homework and instead, you'll present what you've learned today, including you, Lynn. Come with me to the professor's office." Both Lynn and Arender, sitting beside her, were confused by Ludger's suggestion. In the professor's office, Ludger told Lynn to wait for a moment while he went to his desk to look for something. Lynn sat quietly in a corner, her nerves on edge. Her mind was filled with 1,000 questions. Why did he call me here? Could it be for a one-on-one interview? Does he want to kick me out of class? Well, of course he would. How can a student not even summon an elemental properly, especially when they should be keeping up with his spells? But I don't want to miss the professor's lesson right now. A little while later, Ludger returned with a book in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. But out of worry, Lynn only noticed the outermost paper. She jumped up in a panic. She thought it was a request to switch classes. She was certain that Ludger wanted to move her to another professor's class. As soon as Ludger called her name, she hurriedly interrupted him. She bent down and spoke quickly. "Professor Ludger, I'll do my best. I'll do whatever you ask. Please don't make me drop your class." Ludger looked confused by Lynn's reaction. He said, "You've been saying some really strange things. Just take it. My arm's getting tired. From now on, read and study from this book. It will lead you down a path you've never known. Holding the book in her hands, Lynn finally calmed down and looked at it more carefully. It wasn't a request to switch classes, but a research book on non-characteristic magic. Curious, she asked Ludger where he got the book from. Ludger answered briefly, by chance, followed by a vague explanation that the book was the result of a woman's lifetime of research. Lynn continued flipping through the pages, still in disbelief. Besides me, there's someone else with non-characteristic magic. She asked Ludger about the current situation of the woman. She's no longer in this world. That answer immediately pulled Lynn's attention away from her book. At that moment, she noticed that Ludger, who usually looked so composed, seemed different. His face looked kind of sad. Lynn felt a little down knowing she couldn't learn magic from other elements. She had hoped Ludger might have a solution, but he was just as stuck as she was. At least she wanted to be able to control one element. Suddenly, Ludger asked, "What do you think about people who can only control one element?" Lynn hesitated before answering. Probably useless. Ludger handed her a steaming cup of tea and shook his head. Not at all. Someone who can control just one element has infinite talent with that element alone. Their magic can only influence nature in a way that shows off their extraordinary skills with their chosen element. You just heard me explain it. Lynn listened intently to her professor's explanation, still puzzled about attribute-less magic. Literally speaking, it has no attribute at all. Ludger calmly continued, "We're still not sure if attribute-less magic is truly what its name suggests, but for a time, a so-called attribute-less element was grouped together as a part of the earth element." He also emphasized that this was in the past, and now, with the development of science, there are different studies and findings. He advised Lynn not to worry. The world and magic are constantly changing. Anything can happen, which is why I gave you that book. It will help you a lot. After Lynn left, Ludger reclined in his chair to rest. He was indeed surprised that Lynn possessed non-elemental magic, but he hadn't expected to encounter someone with the ability to discern between good and evil at the academy. Those eyes hadn't awakened yet, so Lynn was unaware of them. Ludger never imagined that the book she had written would find its way back to her like this. Could this be fate? The scene shifted back to the academy. The entire class had already left, leaving only Aiden behind to practice. The teaching method Professor Ludger had used was truly effective. He had successfully performed the elemental magic. Aiden thought to himself, when I was casting magic earlier, Professor Ludger's eyes were so gentle yet serious. Maybe I misunderstood him. After all, someone who loves magic this much can't be a bad person. In the grand hall, everyone was chatting lively. A group of noble students gathered around a tall boy who seemed to be someone important. "Oh, who's this?" A mocking voice directed at Aiden. It turned out to be Jevin, the eldest son of Baron Pelliot. He couldn't hold back and taunted Aiden. "Aren't you the kid who couldn't even manifest a basic elemental ability, and you're still acting so arrogant? Ha, little brat." Leo, standing beside Aiden, was boiling with anger. He warned through clenched teeth, "You jerk, if you say one more word." Aiden, worried that his friend might do something rash in his rage, quickly stepped in to calm him down. Aiden wasn't angry at Jevin. Instead, he adopted a humble tone and said, "I'm not sure what I did to upset you, but I'll apologize now. Can you leave us alone from now on?" Of course, Jevin was still unsatisfied with Aiden's humility. "Leave you alone? Sure, but on one condition. Get down on your knees." Tessie, the red-haired girl, shouted angrily, "Hey, don't be ridiculous. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You're a noble." Jevin, on the other hand, continued to provoke her, saying, "Why is someone like you, a washed-up noble, sticking your nose into this? Clearly, you're just poorly raised." Jevin kept insulting Aiden's friends, pushing him to the point where he couldn't hold back anymore. Aiden stepped forward, standing directly in front of Jevin, and shot him a fierce glare. "Jevin Pelliot, you can mock me all you want, but if you touch my friends, I won't let it slide." Aiden's intense presence made Jevin hesitate, but not wanting to lose face, Jevin taunted back, "And what are you going to do about it?" Aiden threw his gloves at Jevin's chest. "You want a game? Fine, I challenge you. A magic duel. But if I win, you'll apologize to Leo and Tessie." Leo and Tessie immediately rushed to stop. The guy named Jevin angrily shouted, "This is a legitimate match. I officially challenged him and my opponent accepted." Ludger responded, "Doesn't seem right for a first-year student to be fighting a magical duel, does it?" This guy wasn't backing down. He argued there's no rule saying a first-year student can't do that. Ludger was starting to get frustrated. He couldn't understand what was going on with this kid. Looking at the crowd still whispering behind him, he began to suspect the issue was with Fruden. He wondered if Fruden would step in and say something to back up the kid. Jevin ignored Ludger's words, and Ludger said, "I won't hold anyone responsible for something that hasn't happened. Go back to your dorms." It seemed like the matter was about to end there, but then Chris Benamor showed up and intervened. He accused Ludger of abusing his power. A professor has no right to stop students from voluntarily fighting each other. The students around them, who had been quiet up until then, began to speak up and join Chris's side. Things were quickly turning against Ludger. Chris then proposed a solution that Ludger couldn't easily refuse. Even so, we can't just let these inexperienced students get hurt. If you're worried about that, why don't we join in together? Ludger didn't agree right away. He asked Aiden and Jevin for their opinions. Both of them immediately agreed. At that point, he had no more reason to refuse and accepted Chris's proposal. But Chris's plan wasn't just that. He invited Ludger to place a bet with him, but also added that it wasn't mandatory, since it was a bit funny to bet on a match where the outcome was already known. Ludger agreed to the suggestion. Chris didn't expect him to agree so easily. The light reflecting off his glasses made Chris look even more slay. He pretended to ask Ludger, "So, Professor Ludger, who do you think will win?" Professor Chris, of course, will bet on Jevin Pelliot. I think he's an extremely talented mage." When his name was praised by the professor, Jevin puffed his chest in pride. He happily thanked Chris. Chris then teased, "I'm sure you'll want to bet on Jevin too, right, Professor? Maybe we should change the bet to how Jevin will win." Ludger remained calm as ever and responded, "No need for that. From the start, I intended to bet on Aiden." Aiden was completely surprised when Ludger placed a bet on him. It's important to note that the difference in their abilities was no small matter. Chris laughed loudly in agreement. He couldn't understand where Ludger got the confidence from. He suggested using the magic that both of them were studying as the basis for the bet. After all, they had both been assigned to teach spellcasting. However, Ludger casually mentioned that he didn't know Chris was also teaching spellcasting. That response hit Chris like a lightning bolt, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. He gritted his teeth in anger, vowing not to let a washed-up noble like Ludger get away with insulting him like that. Ludger ended the conversation by agreeing to start the match in 3 days. Chris muttered a few words and then left. After all, the relationship wasn't close enough for him to linger and chat. At that point, Aiden stepped forward to apologize to Ludger. He blamed himself for putting Ludger in a position where he had to bet on him. Ludger didn't seem to care much about that. He reminded Aiden that it was time to start thinking about how to win. The reason Ludger chose Aiden was that, even though Jevin and Aiden had completely different starting points, it was still too early to conclude that Aiden would definitely lose. In any match, there are always variables. Aiden heard this and seriously asked Ludger about the event that would help him win the match. Ludger calmly pointed out that Aiden already had it. He just needed to use it at the right moment. Aiden, of course, knew exactly what Ludger meant. If he used it, he could win, but he didn't want to take that route. He bent forward, pleading with Ludger, "Professor, I want to win using my own strength. Please guide me, Professor Ludger." Ludger's eyes lit up. This kid was surprising him. Aiden remembered the past, recalling a woman who had once told him to always keep certain words in mind. "Aiden, when I teach you this, you better not show it off recklessly. If you do, you'll get into a lot of trouble and dangerous situations." At that point, the woman suddenly pointed directly at Aiden, making him jump. "Above all, this is my livelihood. You don't want me to starve to death on the street, do you?" Little Aiden hugged his sword to his chest and nodded repeatedly, even though his eyes showed that he didn't really fully understand. The gentlewoman stroked Aiden's head and said, "When you truly feel it's necessary, go ahead and use it without hesitation. Life is long, and there will surely be a moment when you'll have to make a decision, just like you'll need to with Ludger. When that time comes, Aiden, follow what your heart tells you." Back in the present, Ludger and Aiden were still silently observing each other. Ludger couldn't quite understand what Aiden had just said. He thought to himself, "I agreed to teach because I trust your magic. But now, you say you want to win using only your own strength. Does that mean magic isn't part of your strength?" Ludger rubbed his forehead and thought, "Still, this is a good opportunity to test Aiden's skills." He spoke up, "All right then, I'll teach you how to gain an advantage in a wizard's battle. It may be brutal, almost like torture, and there's no guarantee you'll win." Ludger needed to make sure Aiden understood that the path ahead would be tough. With Ludger's agreement to teach him, Aiden no longer hesitated. He firmly promised his teacher, "I will follow through." Ludger didn't waste any time and called Aiden straight to the training. Although Aiden was a bit surprised by how quickly the training was starting, he immediately followed orders. On the outside, Ludger seemed cold, but deep down, he had already expected that Aiden's team should be preparing a celebration for their victory. He was looking forward to seeing how they would perform over the next 3 days. After a long day of training, Aiden collapsed onto his bed, exhausted. He sighed and muttered, "I'm going to die. This training is so much harder than I thought. I can't believe I have 2 more days of this." As he lay there, he wondered, "I don't know why the professor is so sure I'll win. My special magic isn't well known. Maybe he knows something I don't." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the library, Chris Benamore was talking to Jevin Filio. He held a piece of paper that had been scorched by candlelight. He said, "Ludger Cherish personally offered to mentor that ordinary guy. Of course, things were going to turn out this way. He may be trying to act calm, but I'm sure he's desperate for a win. I'm sure you know why I called you here, Jevin Pelliot. Hearing that, Jevin clenched his fist tightly. Yes, sir. You've made it clear that I must definitely defeat that arrogant brat. Jevin was determined to take down the person he considered beneath him, especially to prove his abilities to Chris and not let down the expectations of his respected professor. Chris immediately added, that's not enough. You need to show them just how far the gap is between our nobility and those commoners. I don't think you'll lose, but it's better to play it safe. He pulled out a small vial of jade green liquid from his desk. It was a mana-enhancing potion. Chris told Jevin to drink it before the match. Jevin trembled as he held the vial, a hint of fear crossing his face. But if they find out, won't I lose my status as a student? Chris reassured him, this is a special item from the Benamor family. You won't get caught. Those pathetic commoners will do anything to win, so we can't afford to fall short. Jevin thought to himself, asterisk, yes, the professor is right. It may be a blow to my pride, but it's better than losing to some filthy commoner, asterisk. Chris seemed to have achieved his goal as he gave a wicked smile, praising Jevin for making the right decision. From this moment on, Jevin officially became a puppet in Chris's hands, used to bring down Ludger. 3 days later, the competition took place. In the stands, many students gathered to gossip about the match. They couldn't stop talking. I wonder who will win. Compared to Aiden, this noble has an advantage because the noble's education program is completely different. One female student said, I heard that the first-year student is also pretty impressive. He was involved in the werewolf accident from years ago. Her friend sitting next to her looked just as surprised. He really catch them. I thought Professor Ludger was the one who caught them now. The first girl responded, Professor Ludger guided him. The conversation then shifted to Ludger and Chris sitting in front. The other girls seemed to not know much about Chris, not even recognizing him, only hearing faintly that he was the first-year instructor. The first girl continued, it seems like those two are often compared to each other because they both teach the spellcasting course. Chris gritted his teeth in anger. He had heard everything just now. He made a silent promise to himself, Ludger Cherish, starting today, I will put an end to your arrogance. I will make you face a humiliating defeat in front of everyone. Suddenly, 3 people approached Ludger. It turned out to be Principal Alisa, who had heard there was something interesting happening and brought Professor Hugo along with another professor to join in. Alisa greeted Chris and then asked about Ludger's recent situation. Ludger politely bowed and replied, everything is going smoothly, thanks to you. Curious, she asked him, I heard you made a bet. So, who did the professor bet would win? Was it Professor Chris who bet on Jevin? Ludger calmly confirmed once again that he had bet on Aiden. Upon hearing this, Alisa covered her mouth and chuckled softly. I'm really looking forward to this, but of course the safety of the students comes first. The kind-looking professor standing behind Alisa answered slowly, you don't need to worry about that. The protective magic surrounds their bodies like a shield and will block any attacks. As soon as she finished speaking, the stands erupted in loud cheers. It was time for the match to begin, and the 2 competitors, dressed in armor, stepped onto the field. Aiden's supporters kept shouting encouragements. Go, Aiden. Break that arrogant kid Jevin's pride. On the other hand, Jevin's supporters were just as loud, shouting, we believe in you. Show them the pride of a noble. The referee stepped forward to announce that both competitors would be checked before the match started. While the referee was inspecting them, Aiden reminded Duvin not to forget their promise. Duvin sneered and said, Aiden, win first, then talk. After, the referee still allowed the use of the sword, though he was a bit curious because it was very dull and had no sharp edges. After the check, the referee announced the rules. The side that runs out of defensive magic first will lose, and then he signaled for the start. The 2 of them cast their spells at the same time, both having the same speed. Aiden used water magic, while Jevin used fire magic. Aiden had predicted correctly, knowing that before Jevin could use his strongest fire spell, his own skills had improved since last time. Moreover, looking at the elemental matchup, Jevin was at a disadvantage. Jevin sneered. The elemental advantage Aiden had only mattered if their magical powers were evenly matched. But in this case, they weren't. Jevin had taken a mana-enhancing potion and his magic surged, overpowering Aiden's. Aiden quickly dodged to the side as Jevin pressed his attack even more aggressively. Jevin's face twisted into a sneer. This is the gap between you and me, you lowly commoner. The tension in the air reached its peak. Neither of them dared to let their guard down for even a second. The worrying part was that Aiden was slowly being overwhelmed. Aiden himself realized the situation wasn't good. If things kept going the way they were, he was going to lose. In this case, he decided to use what he had learned from Professor Ludger. Jevin, seeing that Aiden had stopped using magic, smirked. He thought Aiden had given up. Chris, who was watching, also thought it was over. But suddenly, Aiden used his sword to unleash a new move and charged forward. Chris was shocked. No way, He couldn't believe Aiden had just used a teleportation spell. How could you use a technique from battle mages? He guessed that Ludger had taught Aiden this spell in just 3 days. What frustrated him the most was how a simple commoner could master teleportation in just 3 days. Aiden kept charging forward, skillfully dodging Jevon's attacks. Jevon started to fumble, unable to understand what had just happened. The foundation of magic was focus, but Aiden kept moving, making it hard for him to concentrate on his incantations. He tried to reassure himself. No, don't get flustered. I've already cast the spell. With this, I can break his concentration. Just when Van thought Aiden's technique was starting to weaken, Aiden reached his sword. He landed a solid punch to the face, knocking him to the ground. Aiden pointed his sword at Jevon's face and boldly declared, "Now it's my turn." Jevon was terrified. He pleaded, "Wait," but it was too late. The match was over. The referee raised his hand high and announced the winner, Aiden. Sweat poured down his face as he gasped for air. In the stands, people cheered for him. They congratulated Jevon for the effort he had put into his training. The nobles weren't as pleased. One angry voice muttered that Jevon was dishonoring the noble class. Another, calmer voice replied, "I never expected anything from him. He's just some minor baron who follows us around everywhere, and now he's lost to a commoner. It's laughable. He's a disgrace to the nobility." Jevon was still sitting on the ground, unable to accept that he had lost. He couldn't stop thinking of reasons to blame someone else. There's definitely something wrong here. That commoner must have cheated. How else could he have used magic while moving? Filled with frustration, he stood up, his eyes dark and filled with rage. "I'll kill you," he snarled. Jevon cast a fire spell towards Aiden. The crowd gasped in shock. It seemed like Jevon had completely lost his mind. The referee, who had just helped Aiden take off his armor, quickly ran forward to shield him. He told Aiden to get out of the way immediately. The fire was almost upon them now, and its blinding light reflected off Aiden's glasses, making them shine brightly. Aiden recalled the words of the woman. "Asterisk life is long, and there will be a moment when you'll have to make a choice, a decision you can't avoid. When that time comes, just follow your heart, asterisk." To the referee's surprise, Aiden rushed forward and used his sword to block the attack. With all his strength, he slashed through the flames, splitting them into 2 directions before they disappeared. The crowd in the stands gasped in awe at the incredible sight. Alisa, who had been watching carefully the whole time, leaned on her hand and thought, "Asterisk, did that kid just split the magic in half, asterisk." Ludger let out a sigh of relief when he saw that Aiden was safe. "You're still too stubborn about that, but I have no doubt anymore." Aiden used it at the most critical moment. Chris, sitting next to Ludger, couldn't hide his surprise. He couldn't understand how that awkward guy had managed to use anti-magic, a rare spell that could cancel out magic right after a teleportation spell was cast. Jevon hadn't expected Aiden to escape from the attack so easily. He stepped back, but before he could react, Aiden charged and punched him hard in the face, knocking him to the ground. Aiden was furious. "Jevon, I thought at least you'd have the decency to admit your defeat. I didn't know you were this much of a disgrace." Froden Wolberg sat in the stands, arms crossed, watching the fight. His friend sitting beside him grinned, amused by the loser's pitiful state. "Do you think the same, Froden?" Froden didn't seem too interested. He replied, "I'm not sure. Honestly, I never really cared much about those barons, but I do think I should keep an eye on that commoner Aiden. He might be more talented than some of the nobles, after all." The next sentence, of course, was something Froden only thought to himself, not something he said aloud. The match was over, so there was no reason to stick around. He stood up, called his friend to leave, and as they walked away, he couldn't help but glance over at Ludger. Chris was really angry right now. He pretended to ask Jevon, "Did you know that students can use counter magic?" Ludger shot him a sideways glance. "I don't know why you're so upset. You're responsible for teaching the first years. Have you even checked all the personal details of your students? Besides, counter magic didn't play any small part in her victory." Ludger's words left Chris only able to click his tongue, unable to say anything back. Ludger went on. "By the way, our bet was on the research paper, wasn't it?" Chris held back his frustration and tried to ask what Ludger wanted, but Ludger answered that he didn't want anything. He wasn't interested in Chris's research paper. Chris looked at Ludger, still not understanding what he meant. Ludger stood up and said something very profound. "In the end, stealing someone else's work as a bet isn't my style." Everyone had already left, leaving only Chris sitting there, confused, trying to make sense of Ludger's words. After thinking for a moment, Ludger had said, "That's not my style with him, a respectable noble." Chris felt like he might lose his mind. Was Ludger implying that Chris was a lowlife, someone who stole the work of others? In the hallway on their way out, Ludger ran into Sedina. He congratulated him on winning the bet, but she was also worried about the result. She wondered if Ceoren would take an interest in him in the future, and whether that would be a problem. But Ludger thought differently. He wasn't worried at all. In fact, he saw it as a good thing. Segna didn't understand what he meant, so he explained, "Right now, the principal is suspicious of me. She's known about our existence for a while now. Even though I'm a professor, I can't easily escape her list of suspects." Sedina couldn't believe it. Ludger had chosen to be a professor at the academy precisely to avoid suspicion. Ludger continued, "But because of what happened, I've already built a good reputation with the principal. The situation has changed. She can immediately change her opinion about me. However, Sedina, you should cooperate with me as well. It would be too suspicious if I keep meeting with a student who has nothing to do with me. But if a professor meets with an outstanding student, it's completely natural. You need to try harder and show them the image of a model student." Sedina lowered her head. This was the first task Ludger had directly given her. She replied seriously, "Understood. I'll do my best, even if it costs me my life." Hearing that, Ludger replied indifferently, "Whatever." Deep down, Ludger thought to himself, this girl is somehow becoming a bit of a problem. What happened earlier helped me establish that I'm on the principal's side, and I sent a message to the Black Dawn group that I can't act recklessly, but I can't keep going like this. I should probably form my own organization. If I do that, the first thing I need is... Ludger was lost in thought when the orb on the table suddenly lit up. He picked it up and said, "What's going on, Han?" The voice on the other end replied, "Sir, as per your request, I've checked the areas nearby. What should we do to maintain our position? I'm not sure about the situation in the dark alley, but..." Ludger interrupted, "It seems it's time for us to use our power." The voice responded, "You really do pick up on things quickly. You're right, it's time for us to use our power." Ludger thought for a moment, then said to Han, "All right, we're heading there now." Han replied, "Aren't you very busy? I don't think this will be resolved that quickly." Ludger answered, "Don't worry. If that's the case, we'll just make sure to finish it quickly." The sky was completely dark by now. Inside a small bar, the lights shone brightly and voices filled the air. Someone slammed their hand down on the table. Damn it. A sweaty henchman beside him nervously asked, "Boss, are you okay?" The red-haired man, angry, snapped back, "Do I look okay to you? That damn Bellabot guy, does he have to profit from our investment before he dies? Now, everything we put into him is gone." The henchman hesitated, then said, "We still have some money left, right? We could find another way." The boss nodded, "True. That's why I called you all here. Soon, we're going to need to expand our business on a large scale, starting with those bastards." Suddenly, someone opened the door and walked up to the boss. People around them started shouting, "What's wrong with that guy? Hey, we're closed. Get out." The boss also spoke up, "Hey, don't you hear me? We're closed." The newcomer replied, "You're Daughtry, the leader of the Crimson Society, right?" Daughtry, surprised, responded, "I don't know you. Have we met before?" The newcomer walked in and said, "Oh, of course not. I only know because you're quite famous. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is James Mori Arti." Hearing the name, Daughtry immediately stood up and said, "James Mori Arti, the criminal mastermind, the one who controls the black market alleys of the Delicate Kingdom. He's been hiding for years. Why is he here now? Let me check." After a moment of thinking, Daughtry smiled and said, "Professor Mori Arti, I've heard a lot about you. I'm glad to hear those words, but Professor Mori Arti, I can't be sure if what you're saying is true." James Mori Arti spoke up, "You suspect I'm an imposter?" Daughtry laughed and said, "Suck. Well, why would you suddenly show up in a place like this?" James Mori Arti replied, "Your reasoning is reasonable, but I don't think you should be pulling a gun." It turned out that one of Daughtry's men was pointing a gun at James Mori Arti, not just one, but several others as well. James Mori Arti chuckled, turned around, and said, "Oh my, I was right, wasn't I? But unfortunately, it won't do you any good." Daughtry signaled to his men, "Shoot him in the shoulder." The others tried to fire their guns, but nothing happened. Everyone was confused. What's going on? Our guns. James Mori Arti, now fully executing his plan, spoke calmly. "That's why I warned you earlier." Daughtry, anxious, asked, "Fire silence. When did he?" Mori Arti smirked then. An explosion rang out. A massive wolf appeared at the door, its teeth and claws sharp as knives. It walked into the room, and everyone inside froze in fear. It's a werewolf. The werewolf stood right next to James Mori Arti. The people in the room were shocked. "You have a werewolf?" So those werewolves from before, they were his too. The werewolf's eyes grew even sharper. A flashback played and a voice echoed. "Do you arrive? It seems you came here for me to explain things more clearly, right? Yes, let's begin." Han said, "The dark alley where we're lying in wait seems to be divided into 4 dark factions. The biggest one is a group of thieves called the Crimson Society. Everything they do is filthy business. Basically, that alley is under their control." Ludger Cherish said, "If that's the case, our target is the Crimson Society." Han replied, "That's right. If we deal with them first, things will be easier later. But their numbers are huge. It's going to be hard to defeat them quickly. Maybe we should start with the easiest group." Ludger Cherish responded, no, that's a waste of time. Targeting the head of the snake will be much faster. Once we take down the leader, the rest will fall in line. But now isn't the right time. Recently, they've been working together more closely. After the boss, Bellabot, died, this all started to happen, right? Yeah, hold on. It seems like there's some connection between Bellabot and the Crimson Society. So many things and worries are tied to Bellabot. Han said it may be, but the dirty work the Crimson Society was doing, it was all for him. Now that the key figure is gone, they must be pretty pissed off. Ludger Cherish replied, if they're working together, that makes things even easier. We can wipe them out all at once. Han said, no, wait, they're not just ordinary thugs. Their strength is on par with mercenaries. No, more like amateur knights. Ludger responded, that still doesn't mean they have real knights. It's nothing special. Han replied, really? Well, if you say so, then it must be true. Ludger Cherish thought to himself, asterisk, but they're not weak either. Asterisk. Then he said, anyway, Han, I need you to help me with something. Han scratched his head and said, me? At this point, it shifted back to the present, revealing that the wolf was actually Han. Han thought to himself, asterisk, I can't scare them on my own, so I guess I need a giant beast to intimidate them. But for this mission, I'm the best choice, asterisk. Then Han whispered to Ludger Cherish, look, I already told you, if it really comes down to a fight, I'll be the first to run. Ludger Cherish responded, all right, as long as you make them scared, that's all that matters. Daughtry stood there thinking, I don't know if this guy is using a fake name, but I can't go easy on him. I know he has magic, but I didn't expect him to have a wolf by his side like that. Then he smirked and said, I get it now. So you really are Mori Arti. Sorry, I didn't recognize you earlier. Mori Arti responded, looks like I've made my identity clear. He then extended his hand. Now let's get straight to the point. I'm here to start a new business in this city. Daughtry replied, oh, a business? What kind of business are you planning? We'd be happy to help you out. Mori Arti said, thanks, and I've got a few things to say to you all. I'm not a fan of dirty tricks and lies like this. In other words, this Crimson Society is going to disappear for good. The moment Daughtry heard that, it was like a blow to the head. He yelled and charged at him, pulling out a knife, but James Mori Arti used his cane to strike him in the side. The others saw this and said, that bastard Han told James Mori Arti that these guys aren't running away, so what's he going to do now? James Mori Arti said, it's time to split up. Then he slammed his weapon down onto the floor. Asterisk, thud. Asterisk, the lights in the tavern went out instantly and everything around them turned pitch black. Chaos broke out. What's happening? I can't see anything. Someone, turn the lights back on. Someone shouted. What are you planning to do while we can't see? Huh? Damn it. James Mori Arti slowly pulled out his sword. His gaze was more serious than ever. He was dead serious. In the darkness, all that remained was the scene of blood everywhere, and the sounds of fighting echoed through the air. The third-level magic spell, Fool's Dream, had been cast. His sword was soaked in bright red blood. Using the power of darkness and illusions, he spread fear among his enemies. A complex and powerful spell. Screams filled the air. Die. Help me. Damn it, stop. Chaos erupted all around. People in the darkness swung their swords wildly, sometimes hitting objects, other times striking their own comrades. In the blackness, somehow, James Mori Arti had killed everyone there. Now, only Daughtry remained. James Mori Arti simply smiled. The injured people tried to stand up and attack James Mori Arti, but he just used his sword to gently block their strikes. The clash of the blades produced a blinding flash of light. An aura was controlled to cut through their magic. They were definitely allied knights. Well, anyway, I didn't think I'd lose to them. James Mori Arti said calmly, then smiled lightly. Just then, a purple vial fell to the ground, and with a loud boom, it exploded, releasing its contents into the air. One of them screamed, "It could be poison. Fall back!" Another nearby soldier said, "Poison won't affect us if we protect our bodies with magic." As he spoke, a weapon flew toward him. His words were pointless, but something seemed to strike his sword. Then he screamed in pain as if some poison had gotten onto his hand. The poison quickly spread from his hand to his arm. It caused him great pain and fear. His clothes even started to corrode and decay rapidly. Another man, witnessing this, gritted his teeth and thought, he's using the vials as a trap, trying to throw the poison at him. He knows we can't avoid the poison if it makes direct contact. The man who had been poisoned was now shaking and out of his mind. He screamed, "Damn it, where are you hiding? I'll kill you." Before he could finish his sentence, James Mori Arti appeared in front of him and thrust his sword from his chin up to his brain. The outcome was clear. The others watched in panic as they saw his brutal method. James Mori Arti only gave them a cold, deathly stare before calmly drawing his sword. The man with purple hair said, "You bastard, are you really Professor Mori Arti? I've never heard that Mori Arti was any good at fighting." James Moriarty replied, "Why would I need to teach you? Anyway, you're going to die." The man with purple hair thought, asterisk, he made my opponent lower his guard and expose his weakness. As long as I'm careful, I can win. First, I need to close the distance, asterisk. Then the man with purple hair rushed toward James Moriarty, preparing to attack, but Moriarty threw a vial of purple poison. The man with purple hair thought, asterisk, you think that will work on me. I just need to deflect it, asterisk. He swung his sword to knock it away. But a moment later, he realized that his sword had been poisoned and was slowly being eaten away. He was now feeling a sense of urgency inside. His sword, let alone that bottle. James Moriarty had already drawn his gun and pointed it at the man with purple hair. The purple-haired man was panicking. Damn it, I have to drop my sword to dodge. With his reflexes, he could have dodged in time, but it was too late. A human's reflexes can't be faster than a bullet. The result was that he was shot through the stomach. It wasn't a bullet, but some kind of dark shadow. The purple-haired man was trembling. How could my own shadow do that? Magic is supposed to work close to the caster, right? He never thought this would even be possible. James Moriarty aimed the gun again and fired at the purple-haired man. Then he walked over to Daughtry. Daughtry now looked pale as a ghost, drained of all color. James Moriarty said, "So, what do you think? Shall we continue our conversation?" Next, James Moriarty casually poured himself a drink. Han walked up and said, "How can you drink right now?" James Moriarty replied, "Did you finally drop your disguise?" Han said, "Ever since my nose became more sensitive, I can't stand the smell of blood." Seems like he screamed in agony. Is he dead? James Moriarty said, "Not yet. Now I know all the information I need. I plan to hand over to other organizations." Han replied, "All right, I think you'll handle everything fine. By the way, what are you drinking?" James Moriarty lifted his glass to take a sip and said, 38-year-old Gorgonison. Han became impatient. "What? Damn it. Are you drinking it alone? Pour me some." James Moriarty replied sharply, "I thought you didn't like the smell of blood." Han continued, "Come on, I still want to try it, even if it makes me sick. Anyway, never mind that. What do you plan to do with the rest of the people in the Crimson Society?" James Moriarty answered, "I'll choose a few of them, find some who could be useful to me. There are a lot of secret documents and files in the office on the second floor. They'll be useful to you, haha. I guess I have more work to do now. Don't you think there's too much for just the two of us to handle?" James Moriarty added, "I anticipated that. You should write that I know a lot of people who can help us." Han skeptically turned to him and said, "Really? I'm sure there's no one fit for the job, but come on, do you really think they'll respond to your invitation?" James Moriarty replied, "They said they'll come once they finish their current tasks. Do you hate them that much?" Han answered, "Of course. None of them are normal. Yeah, I know I'm in no position to say that. Even if I complain, we'll still follow your plans. I remember the principal is suspicious of you. Is it okay for you to be hanging around like this?" James Moriarty set his glass down. "Don't worry, they won't follow us. Those mages won't take risks unless they're sure about them. Especially now with the principal under scrutiny from the opposition. She won't do anything that could backfire on her." Han nodded. "That makes sense. So what will you call the organization?" James Moriarty raised an eyebrow. "A name?" Han frowned. "You want to take control of Red Relic, right? Then at least we should have a name. How many people do we have in total, including us? Maybe around 10? James Moriarty thought for a moment and then said, "I have an idea. You and Owen." Han looked at him, confused. "You and Owen? Anonymous? Are you really thinking of naming the group Anonymous?" James Moriarty replied, "Well, that's one idea." Han poured himself a drink and said, "No, I get it now. Well, Owen, how about we share the last drink of the day together?" James Moriarty happily raised his glass with Han. Cheers for the birth of the organization. Then the sound of clinking glasses echoed throughout the bar. Celine asked Professor Ludger Cherish, "Why don't you have an assistant?" Professor Ludger Cherish, who had been about to take a bite, froze, his expression turning sour. He responded, "I don't really feel the need for one at the moment." Celine asked, "But you have 80 students. Don't you feel overwhelmed?" He answered casually, "Not really. It's not that hard." Celine exclaimed, "Wow, you're really something." He heard this and just quietly cut his steak, but a thought quickly crossed his mind. Does everyone have assistants? Am I the only one who has to work like a dog? He stopped his thoughts and then asked Celine, "Professor Celine, do you have an assistant?" She heard him and replied, "Yes, but I don't need much help, so I only have 3 assistants right now." He was taken aback and couldn't believe it. He thought to himself, "Didn't you just say you don't need much help? Some new professors usually have like 10 assistants?" He silently glanced over at Professor Benamor, thinking 3 assistants seems like too few for Professor Benamor. Brino also suggested he should hire a few people. Celine and Marita spoke up one after the other. "If you're on your own, it'll be tough. I think you at least need about 5 assistants, Arita said. If you need, I can help you put together a list of promising students. When Selena heard that, she cheerfully added, I'll help a bit too. Hearing this, he helplessly said, all right, thank you, everyone. He sat in the study, holding a book in his hand, and quietly pondered everyone's suggestions. Assistants, huh? Turning the pages one by one, he couldn't stop thinking. The assistant would earn extra points and have access to additional unlimited classes. In fact, the new professor might even have at least 6 assistants. He lightly propped himself up on his hand and stared into the distance, not thinking about graduation. Some people had agreed to continue studying magic under the professor's guidance. This was basically a 21st century school. He closed the book and glanced at the neat stack of papers next to his desk. A thought suddenly crossed his mind. It's good that someone is handling the small tasks. The question was, who should he choose? He shuffled through the papers. Then it hit him. All right, I have the list. Is there anything else? He picked up the stack of papers and searched for the list. In his mind, he thought, so it's not that urgent. Suddenly, he stopped and exclaimed, huh? The young man was walking down the hallway. He suddenly noticed someone standing in the corner of the wall. He stopped and said, if you have something to say, come out and say it, Sedina. Hearing this, he hesitated and replied, yes, he thought. No one follows the professor around like that. Doesn't she have anything else to do? Then he had a sudden realization. He turned to Sedina and said, all right, by the way, I have something I need to ask you. Sedina, hiding behind the wall, asked, huh? Me. She quickly responded, don't you have class on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 o'clock a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m.? Isn't that the professor's teaching time? He chuckled when he heard this. She continued, I'm free during that time. Does the professor need something from me? He quickly walked over to her, speaking as he moved. Great. He stopped right in front of her and said, be my assistant. Sedina replied, okay. Then she suddenly realized and shouted, huh? What is the professor talking about? How could someone like you? He responded, if you become my assistant, you'll be able to get closer to me. She hesitated, saying, but I don't have anything to do with the professor, right? People will get suspicious. He reassured her, don't worry, your name is already on the list I received. This makes sense. Sedina replied, I see. He suddenly said, if you don't want to, I won't force you. Sedina jumped, stammering, of course not. He confirmed once again, so you're agreeing, right? She quickly nodded vigorously. He continued, all right, bring the assistant registration form to me within 2 days. Sedina replied, yes, sir. He silently rubbed his chin, deep in thought. Not bad, the first assistant isn't too shabby. If I keep her close, I'll be able to gather information about the Black Dawn Guild bit by bit. In 2 days, I'll have a loyal errand runner. An hour later, Sedina arrived with the assistant registration form. He opened the door, surprised and a bit helpless, and muttered, well, that's fast. She quickly responded, thank you, Professor. He thought to himself, faster than I expected. Just an hour later, in a crowded lecture hall, everyone was chatting excitedly. Lynn asked, why is it so noisy today? Arender answered, I think there's some strange rumor going around. She turned to Lynn and said, I heard Professor Ludger Cherish is looking for an assistant. Lynn replied in surprise, wow, that sounds interesting. Arender continued, what's even more interesting is that so far, he hasn't chosen any assistants. People are saying he doesn't even know a professor gets an assistant. Lynn responded, no way. He's Professor Ludger Cherish after all. Arender went on, and the hottest rumor right now is about that. Lynn was surprised and asked, about what? Arender answered, the all-powerful witch-granting stone. They say it's being hidden somewhere in Ceoren. Lynn asked, is that rumor true? Arender replied, there are still a lot of mysteries that haven't been uncovered, and this place is in the heart of magic, Ceoren. It might be a little exaggerated, but there really is an artifact like that. Lynn said, I see. While the two were talking, Flora sat with her chin resting in her hand, looking at them with a disgusted expression. In her mind, she thought, all-powerful stone. Yeah, right. If something like that existed, the higher-ups would have confirmed it by now. She rolled her eyes, then suddenly realized, by the way, is that superhero-like person really looking for an assistant? She thought about Professor Ludger Cherish. An assistant was someone officially recognized by the professor, so naturally, they would have skills matching someone like herself. She confidently waved her hand, thinking, I'd definitely be considered if I applied personally. But just then, she heard someone say, the professor is coming, everyone would be quiet, and her train of thought was interrupted. Her face darkened. After Sedina stepped up to the podium, people started whispering among themselves. Who's that? I've never seen that student before. Is he carrying study materials? What? He's Professor Ludger Cherish's assistant? Flora was surprised when she heard this. Wait, did he hire an assistant? He leaned against the doorframe and called out to Sedina. Good job, Sedina. You can leave now. Sedina quietly turned and said, yes. The entire auditorium looked at him in surprise. He paused, thinking, asterisk, why are they acting like this, asterisk? The sunlight gently bathed the grassy field outside. The elementary school courtyard echoed into the classroom. Focus, class is starting. As time passed, the final lesson eventually ended. He wrapped up the class. That's all for today. The material covered will be tested, so make sure to review it. Suddenly, a female student stood up. Professor Ludger Cherish, I have a question. He replied, What's your question, Julia Plumhart? She answered, Oh my gosh, you remember my name. He thought, she's the top student after all, and I heard the Magic Council is supporting her too. He asked again, Go ahead, ask. It's not that important. Her expression turned mocking as she asked the next question. How did you even choose an assistant? His eyes grew colder at her words. In his mind, he thought, I knew she'd ask that. But he replied calmly, I chose her myself. She continued, Were there any specific requirements, like having a highest magic ability, or maybe? At this point, her eyes took on a cunning look. She added, Someone so famous that everyone knows their name. He remained silent, thinking to himself, this isn't just a simple question of curiosity. He spoke up, When choosing an assistant, the only thing I care about is their personality. If you have a good one, then I'd be happy to interview you. Julia blushed, feeling embarrassed. He spoke coldly, adding, however, after asking that question, I don't think you need an interview anymore, because it seems you're not the right fit to be my assistant. She heard this and frowned. If there are no more questions, then I'll be going. The midterm is coming up soon, so make sure you're well prepared. Sedina stood outside, looking in with a concerned expression. The meeting had just ended, and Ludger turned to head towards the office door, casually walking out with a thick stack of documents in hand. It seemed he sensed someone was standing nearby as he immediately glanced over. In front of him was the petite figure of Sidna Rothian, and she had spotted him right away. They stood there, looking at each other for a long moment. Finally, to break the awkward silence, Ludger decided to speak first. Have you been waiting here this whole time? Sidina looked flustered by his question, stumbling over her words like a child just learning to speak. Oh well, Ludger noticed the nervousness on her pretty face and continued with some gentle advice. Next time, don't wait in front of the lecture hall like this. Just wait in my assistant's office. Sedina immediately replied, Yes, sir. However, just as Ludger was about to turn and leave, Sedina quickly called him back. It seemed like Sedina wanted to say something more, but when she met his cold, sharp gaze, she faltered, unable to find the words. Time dragged on. Ludger, growing impatient, coldly asked, What is it? After several minutes of internal struggle, she decided to keep her thoughts to herself and quickly changed the subject. It's nothing, sir. I hope you have a good day at work. Hearing this, Ludger wasn't interested in probing further. He simply responded, Yeah, you too. He then handed her the stack of papers he'd been holding since earlier, adopting a serious tone as he instructed, These are the assignments the students submitted today. Keep them safe until the end of the day. Sedina politely accepted the stack with both hands, continuously saying, Yes, sir, before quickly leaving. At that moment, the sound of high heels clicking on the floor came from behind Ludger. Then, a calm voice called out, Professor. Ludger instinctively turned his head. It turned out that the owner of the voice was Flora Lumos. Seeing her, he immediately asked, Is something wrong? Flora Lumos. The cold, sharp look in Ludger's eyes made Flora feel uncomfortable. She nervously and hesitantly replied, I heard you just hired an assistant. When Ludger heard Flora's vague response, he misunderstood that she was trying to make an excuse to apply for the assistant position and immediately asked, Is that so? Do you want to be my assistant? Flora was startled by this and quickly denied it. Of course not. How could I possibly do that? Realizing that Flora had another reason for approaching him, Ludger became more cautious and asked, Then, what is it that you need to see me about? Facing Ludger's suspicion, Flora shyly turned her face away. After a brief moment of silence, she finally gathered the courage to respond, I just wanted to thank you. Not wanting to seem weak in front of Ludger, Flora frowned, closed her eyes tightly, and placed her hands on her hips, trying to appear proud, as she explained. Last time, it was thanks to your help that I was able to return safely. Also, I think the advice you gave me was absolutely right. Ludger kept a neutral expression as he listened to Flora's words of thanks. His cold gaze was fixed on her, and each word he spoke sounded like a simple fact. I'm just doing what a professor is supposed to do. As long as you take my advice seriously, that's all that matters. Flora didn't think much of it after hearing his response. Still feeling a bit worried, she asked him, Are you heading back right after this? That day, you must have used up more mana than I did. Without hesitation, Ludger replied, I'm perfectly fine, but inside my mind is screaming in pain. Honestly, I almost passed out. Flora felt reassured after hearing Ludger's response. She then changed the subject and asked, Professor, how many elements do you specialize in? I only saw you use 5 elements in class. Ludger slowly answered, "Those are the only elements I can use." It may have seemed like Ludger was being upfront with Flora, but in reality, he had already planned everything in advance. He silently thought to himself, actually, I can use all 10 elements, but that wouldn't be good. Unlike a mage who specializes in a single element, the downside of mastering multiple elements is that none of them are particularly strong. As he thought this, Ludger collapsed onto the floor in frustration and whispered, "But if this gets out, I'll be in a tough spot, so I'll just say 5. After hearing Ludger's words, Flora, in her innocence, believed him right away. She stroked her chin and sighed, 5. That's too many. Noticing that Flora didn't have any more questions, Ludger said, "If you don't have anything else to ask, then I'll be on my way." With that, he quickly turned and started to leave. Just as Flora was about to reach out to stop him, he happened to turn back. His voice, full of sincerity, rang out, "If you haven't changed your mind, you're welcome to come and register as my assistant anytime. You could really be my assistant." With those words, Ludger turned coldly and left, leaving Flora standing there in shock. She stood frozen, her head lowered. How frustrating. Back to Ludger, he was sitting in his office, looking serious. He asked the person across from him, "You called me here? You the principal?" On the other side, Principal Alisa Wolferdo smiled and replied, "Hello, Professor Ludger. Have you heard the recent rumors that inside Ceoren the all-powerful stone has disappeared?" Ludger nodded slightly and said slowly, "I've heard about it. I think it's just a silly rumor going around among the students." However, Alisa immediately disagreed with him. Under Ludger's suspicious gaze, Alisa continued, "The all-powerful stone can grant wishes. It really exists." With that, Alisa took the all-powerful stone from her person. It was a mysterious object with unique power that had been around for a very long time. Ludger stared at the stone in her hand, glowing with a green light, and asked in confusion, "A holy relic?" Alisa quickly confirmed, "Yes, exactly. An ancient holy relic of unknown origin, its power estimated to be 100 times greater than a relic that could be created by a grand mage." At that moment, Ludger still seemed to have some doubts. Is a holy artifact like that really in Ceoren? Alisa quickly confirmed, "We've had it in our possession for quite a while." Her face grew serious as she continued, "But that's highly classified information. If there's a rumor, it means the information has already leaked." Not only that, Alisa believed someone had revealed the secret, though there was still another possibility. Since the all-powerful stone had immense power, the area where it was kept followed extremely strict security measures. The information could have been leaked while the storage room's defenses were relaxed during the transport process. With that, Alisa looked directly into Ludger's eyes. "Since this rumor is so unusual, I'm considering asking you to investigate it for me." Alisa's request immediately made Ludger more cautious. On the surface, it seemed like the principal trusted him with the task, but she wasn't the type to trust someone just because they were on her side. It was more likely that she was taking this opportunity to investigate his background. While Ludger quietly thought this over, Alisa tapped her fingers lightly on the table. "Let me know if you have any questions. Also, please help us with the transport of the artifact." Ludger immediately agreed after hearing that. Then he asked, "Is there any other professor joining us?" Alisa looked at him, her eyes filled with deep thought. She replied, "Yes, but all of you have been assigned to different areas, so you won't meet them." At that, Ludger's eyes briefly closed. "I see." Before Ludger left, Alisa reminded him, "There's still some time before the stone transport starts, so for now, just continue with your regular work." As time slowly passed and night began to fall, covering the city, Ludger sat in his office, deep in thought. Could the leap from Ceoren be related to Black Dawn? But that wouldn't explain the lack of any ties to Sedena. Ludger gently pushed up his glasses. "I'm not sure if this is another deal or if there's a different reason behind it, but something will happen soon enough." After thinking for a moment, Ludger quickly pulled a small object from his pocket and examined it. The sacred artifact. "Looks like I found one here too. I've been changing identities while traveling through different lands for a long time. Sometimes I'm a mercenary, other times a professional criminal, and occasionally a merchant. There's only one reason I've been wandering the world under so many different identities, and that's to find the remaining pieces of this sacred artifact. I came here because I heard the Empire had a sacred artifact, but I didn't expect there would be one in Ceoren too. Of course, it's a different type from the one I'm looking for, but what if I could use the all-powerful stone to locate the one I need?" As Ludger sat thinking, the orb on the table suddenly began to glow. Han's voice came through from the other side. "Boss, I've cleaned up the scene. It's probably because you've been keeping an eye on the Crimson Society that the other 3 factions are staying put. But the piranhas, the ones trying to take over the society, are losing it." Han's face suddenly grew serious. "Boss, I might need your help. Are you free?" Ludger replied slowly, without rushing, "I should be available in a week." It seemed like Han could sense there was something off in Ludger's answer, so he immediately asked, "Is something going on over there?" Ludger didn't hold back and replied, "There's a sacred artifact in Ceoren." Hearing this, Ham propped his chin up with his hand, looking thoughtful. "You're getting into more trouble than I am." Not only that, but Ham was curious, what kind of school has a sacred artifact? The principal must have some secret basement or something. The more Han talked, the more impatient Ludger became. Han, stop rambling. Han, surprised by the response, dramatically collapsed, complaining that Ludger didn't know how to joke around. "All right, anyway, I'm going on a date now." Ludger could only wish his friend good luck. Back to the matter at hand. Ludger fell silent, deep in thought. "I have to act as soon as possible, but for now, I still have to stay put because of the principal's orders." He stared intently at the object in his hand, the all-powerful stone that could grant wishes. Was this the chance he'd been waiting for? Sacred artifacts weren't easy to find. Even someone like him, who had traveled all over, had only managed to find 3 pieces. Based on their shape and size, there were probably 4 more. Once he gathered all 7 pieces, he'd have a complete artifact of his own. If he could pull it off, then. With that thought, Ludger gripped the piece tightly in his hand. His silhouette flickered in the moonlight that spilled through the window. The servant asked respectfully, "Your Highness, is there anything else you need?" Arender replied, "No, you can go inside." The servant obediently followed her instructions. Arender tiredly sat on the bed. She felt like none of the servants would leave her alone for even an hour. She quietly thought to herself, "Given my position, I guess I have no choice, but I wish I could live a normal life like any other student." Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, making Arender jump. She asked the servant, "Is something happening outside?" The servant respectfully answered, "Someone has sent a request." Arender asked curiously, "What kind of request?" It was Terina who had sent the request. She was kneeling to show her respect to Arender and also apologized for coming so late at night, explaining that it was due to an urgent matter. Arender said, "It's fine," but she was also curious. "What's going on with you?" Terina straightforwardly asked, "Is it true that there have been werewolves in Ceoren recently?" Arender answered honestly, "Yes, and one of the professors has already taken care of them." Terina explained, "I asked about the werewolves because I'm investigating a case related to them." Immediately, Arender asked, "Which case exactly are you referring to?" Terina refused to reveal the details, explaining that she had been asked to keep it a secret and asked Arender to understand. Terina continued, "I will meet with that professor personally. Do you know who it is?" Arender answered without hesitation, "Ludger Cherish, a new professor." She wished Terina a swift outcome in her investigation. Terina thanked her, then suddenly remembered something important and respectfully called out, "Arender." She continued, "The Grand Princess is waiting to hear from you. She wanted me to tell you that she's been feeling very upset because you haven't been in contact lately." Arender was silent for a moment before responding, "I know." After hearing Arender's reply, Terina politely ended the conversation. As soon as the conversation was over, Arender let out a long sigh. She thought about asking Terina more about the Grand Princess, but then realized that the Grand Princess had chosen to have Terina speak with her, probably as a way to show concern for Arender. Arender felt a deep sense of discomfort in her heart. After finishing her conversation with Arender, Terina's subordinate asked if something was wrong. She explained that a new professor had dealt with the werewolf situation and that she needed to meet this person as soon as possible. Arender then asked his subordinate Inya for an update on the investigation into the factory. Inya reported that she had analyzed some unburned pieces of paper. It seemed like someone had been researching or developing something, but the details were still unclear. Terina didn't think there were no leads, but she couldn't move forward with anything just yet. She asked Inya if there was anything else. Inya added another piece of information. The Crimson Society, a group that had recently disappeared overnight in Redderbelite. Terina was confused. What does the Crimson Society have to do with this? Inya suggested that they should still keep an eye on it. Terina dismissed the idea. There's no need to worry about that for now. She told Inya to stay focused on their investigation and also to gather a little more information in Redderbelite before they headed to Ceoren. Both Inya and another subordinate acknowledged the orders. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Ludger was writing on the board while thinking. Over the past few days, more and more rumors had spread. The students were acting in strange ways because of the werewolf incident. It seemed like trouble was on its way for him too. Ludger noticed that the students seemed sluggish and unfocused, so he closed his book and decided to stop the lesson. He spoke up and said, "It looks like you all are getting bored. In that case, I'll show you something interesting that can catch the attention of students even when they're tired." A magical flame appeared on the tip of Ludger's finger. He began his engaging lecture. Wizards usually cast spells by focusing on themselves, since magic comes from the words of the incantations. However, he paused for a moment when he noticed a student nodding off. Then, a flame appeared right in front of the student, startling him awake in a panic. Ludger continued, "If you touch it, you can do this too. I said magic manifests externally centered around the words of the spell. but in reality, there's a small gap in the middle of it. Usually, this distance is about 1 meter at most. However, if you use more magical energy, you can extend it even further. I call this the magical coordinate binding. Flora was completely surprised by the magic Ludger used to mark coordinates, as she had never heard of anything like it before. She was really curious to find out where he had learned this magic. Ludger, however, calmly continued explaining, "This might be interesting to you, but it's just a small adjustment in how magic is used. It was created by the inspiration of a wizard. And I'm not showing it to you because I don't want to teach you how to use it." The whole class immediately buzzed with excitement because Ludger didn't want to teach them this magic. They all asked him why. Ludger answered, "I want you to understand something. All magic develops from a solid foundation, and a perfected creation comes only after that. To use magic truly well, you have to learn it step by step. So if you feel bored or think I'm just stating the obvious, then focus on learning first. It's for your own future." Ludger ended the class and also said, "If anyone wants to learn more about this magic, come to my office. I'll appreciate it if you do." When Ludger got to his office, he found that Stadina had been waiting for him there for a while. Meanwhile, Ken noticed someone was trying to contact him, so he told Stadina to wait outside for a bit, then immediately set up a barrier to separate them. Ludger quietly thought to himself that it was probably almost time for him to be contacted. The conversation was immediately connected between him and the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister informed him about an emergency situation. The all-powerful stone has been stolen. This news left Ludger stunned and shocked. The Prime Minister added, "I underestimated your enemies." Ludger asked, "What happened?" The Prime Minister explained, "Your enemies knew about the stone's security base. They attacked before you could do anything." Meanwhile, Alisa was feeling overwhelmed. No matter how far the rumors had spread, she had believed that with quick action, they could prevent this. But in the end, such a huge mistake had happened. Back to the Prime Minister discussing plans with Ludger, he said, "I'm chasing after them. But if they use the stone, the situation will get much worse." Ludger replied, "I know." He then asked, "How long do you think the golden hour will last?" The Prime Minister estimated, "Until midnight tonight." Ludger nodded, understanding. The Prime Minister continued, "Is there anything else you want to ask?" Ludger advised, "You should move, instead of sitting here asking a few more questions." The Prime Minister responded, "All right, I'm leaving this in your hands." After the conversation ended, Ludger withdrew the barrier and thought to himself, "Asterisk, I knew this would happen eventually, but I didn't expect it to come so soon." Asterisk, he was frustrated and thought about those people. Asterisk, what are they even thinking? Asterisk, he still hadn't erased the Prime Minister's suspicions. Asterisk, they'll probably consider me one of them. Asterisk, Ludger felt something was off and wondered, asterisk, given the situation, is it really number one on the list? Asterisk, immediately, he called Santa back. She hesitated before opening the door, unsure about stepping into Ludger's office. He asked, "Looks like one of the subordinates is acting on their own, right?" Sanada nervously nodded and replied, "Yes." Ludger's tone became serious as he commanded Sanada, "Explain everything to me from the beginning. What exactly happened?" Sanada reported honestly. According to the investigation, it all started with a third-tier individual who inquired about some news. He found documents related to the all-powerful stone while searching for information about Ceoren. The rumor about the stone spread among the students. After reading about it, he fully believed in the rumor and learned about the stone's existence and its location. He quickly reported it to a second-tier individual. However, that person didn't report it back, but took matters into their own hands. Ludger furrowed his brows and asked, "What's his name?" Sanada answered, "His name is De Myers. He has close ties to the government and often handles their affairs." Ludger said that if it was such important information, then he really should have reported it as the first priority. Did he seriously think you would know? Ludger asked, "Why do you think he did that?" Sanada replied, "It's just my guess, but I think he wants to become a first priority. The position of first priority can change at any time, and 7 positions are available. De Myers doesn't have the talent to satisfy his greed, so maybe this time he's planning something big." Ludger nodded, showing that he understood, and asked, "So, what's the situation now?" Sanada responded with a question of her own, "Are you planning to take action yourself?" Ludger usually agreed, and then informed her. "We already started chasing him, but we warned that if we're not careful, our identities could be exposed." Sanada added, "Right now, they're on the run after stealing the stone, along with a few dozen accomplices. The only thing I know is that they're heading toward the Silent Forest." Ludger stood up and told himself it was time to go. Sanada wanted to know what she should do. He told her she didn't need to do anything, which surprised Sanada. Just knowing that information is enough, Ludger said, complimenting Sanada for doing well. "I'll leave the rest to you." Sanada, overwhelmed with joy and holding back tears, thanked Ludger as he coldly walked out the door. Standing outside the office, he wondered, "I only said a few words, so why did Sanada look like that? Did she think it was some kind of extreme loyalty test or something? But it didn't seem like that was the case. Ludger walked confidently, thinking that the most important thing now was, I haven't finished yet, I need to cast the Ader Nocturnus spell. A dark path opened up in front of him. As evening fell across the academy grounds, Ludger walked with authority, powered by the Ader Nocturnus spell. It was a summoning spell called a Path of Magic, which required a large amount of magical energy but could hide the user's presence completely, making it impossible for anyone to track them. Ludger passed by Flora and her friends. His magical aura made her pause and turn her head to look back. Cheryl asked Flora, "What's wrong?" Flora was lost in thought, trying to make sense of the feeling that someone had just passed by. But when she turned around, there was no one there. Still, she was sure she had smelled magic. Flora wondered, is it invisible magic? She had to check, so she immediately ran after Ludger, even though Cheryl called out and asked, "Where are you going?" The girl called out Flora's name in vain. Two professors were standing in front of the Silent Forest gate talking. One of them said, "Damn it, they actually ran into the Silent Forest." The other replied, "Even if it's dangerous, shouldn't we call for more people? How is it that places like this still exist? It's been destroyed so many times already." Both of them were so caught up in their conversation that they didn't notice Ludger approaching. He walked straight into the forest, ignoring the professor's talk about the place. But no matter how hard they tried, the forest always grew back quickly, driving those who entered mad. One of the professors said blocking the entrance is the best choice for us. The sounds of painful and frantic screams echoed through the forest. One man yelled at the screaming person, "Calm down. You want to go crazy like that, guy?" Another asked, "DeMyers, what should we do? They're surrounded and we can't stay here much longer." DeMyers shouted loudly at the person asking, "Shut up." He told himself he had a plan for everything, but everyone was left in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. DeMyers was anxious and scared. "Damn it, it really is the all-powerful stone, but it's totally useless," he muttered to himself. He trembled as he held the stone, questioning, power coming from the stone is real, but why isn't it doing anything? Suddenly, DeMyers shouted, "Who are you?" His voice startled all of his men. Then, Ludger's voice rang out, "Is this all there is? I heard there were at least 10 of you. Did the rest get captured or left behind?" When DeMyers' men saw Ludger, they froze in fear, trembling uncontrollably. Even DeMyers was speechless. He couldn't say a word. He could only hesitate and barely whisper Ludger's name. Ludger's voice was stern, his gaze cold and menacing as he stared straight at DeMyers. "Second in command, DeMyers, do you know why I came here personally?" A wave of fear crawled under DeMyers' skin, making him feel like he was about to collapse. "He knows everything. How did I end up facing that cold-blooded John Doe? I'm going to die today." Every sense in his body trembled, but it couldn't stop him from calculating how to survive. Skillfully, DeMyers and his companions knelt down, hands respectfully offering the stone to Ludger. "This is the all-powerful stone. I present it to you, my lord." Ludger looked at the glowing green stone, then reached out to take it. He didn't forget to praise DeMyers for a job well done. With that praise came a farewell that left DeMyers in shock. Sharp, magical thorns pierced through DeMyers and the others, instantly killing them. Before his eyes closed for the last time, DeMyers struggled to ask Ludger, his breath shallow. "First order. Why?" There was no need for long explanations. The last thing DeMyers saw was Ludger coldly taking the stone, holding it in his hand and looking at him as his life faded away. With disdain, Ludger spoke. "Why? Telling you would only waste my time." Ludger studied the stone in his hand, thinking asterisk. This is the all-powerful stone asterisk, but then something strange occurred to him. Asterisk, wait, this isn't the holy relic. Asterisk, Ludger recalled that the all-powerful stone was supposed to have a powerful source of magic inside, but that was it. However, the headmaster had once told him. Suddenly, everything froze for a moment as a purple orb appeared in the sky, interrupting his thoughts. From the orb, a burst of light filled with magic shot straight toward Ludger, causing an explosive shockwave. As the explosion subsided, beautiful petals from the blast floated gently in the wind. Where Ludger had been standing moments ago, only a fake, all-powerful stone remained on the ground. Alisa bent down and picked up the stone. "I really fired it with all my strength," she marveled. "It's hard to believe there's not even a crack." Under the moonlight, Alisa said, "It's all over now." Standing in the center of the explosion's epicenter, shaken by the shockwave she had caused, Alisa thought about the fake, all-powerful stone. With just a little more bait, the big mouse she was after would fall into her trap. A sinister smile spread across Alisa's face. "Professor Ludger Cherish, you're going to regret showing up here." Behind a tree far from where Alisa stood, Ludger sat leaning against the trunk. He felt uneasy just moments ago when the beam of light had struck toward him. He had used Ader Nocturnus to escape. At this moment, Ludger was sitting and resting, thinking about how his incantations were essentially the same as magic. Maybe that was why he had been able to survive. In this world, there was no such thing as teleportation. But with the magic coordinate system and the unique nature of his spell, he could do anything. Ludger realized that the person who had attacked him was a 6th-tier professor, Alisa Wolferdo's strength. He wondered, why didn't Alisa ask me to do this, but why did she come alone? Moreover, the all-powerful stone was also fake. Ludger suddenly thought, could it be that Alisa discovered my true identity and is trying to trap me? A sharp headache suddenly struck, making Ludger wince in pain. He knew that the teleportation spell had drained his magic, so he immediately took some medicine to replenish it. Once he started feeling stable again, Ludger continued to think Alisa wouldn't choose such a complicated path. So from the beginning, she must have acted alone, not even telling her allies to maximize the effect. Ludger praised Alisa as someone truly extraordinary. Then he noticed someone approaching him and immediately raised his staff toward them. Flora was startled by Ludger's sudden defensive move and screamed out. She called his name. Professor Ludger also realized the person approaching him was Flora Lumos. He asked her, "What are you doing here? Didn't you know this forest is off limits?" Flora hesitated before responding. Feeling uneasy, she shouted back at Ludger, "Why are asterisk you asterisk here then? I'm the one who should be asking asterisk you asterisk that. And what's with that incredibly powerful magic I'm sensing right now?" Faced with Flora's question, Ludger broke a sweat, unsure how to answer. He simply said, "That's none of your business. Go back now, this forest is too dangerous for students." Flora replied, "I'm not that weak." Ludger sighed in relief since it seemed Flora wasn't in any immediate trouble. He then asked, "Did you find a way to sneak past the gatekeepers and into the forest?" Flora felt awkward and didn't want to tell Ludger that she had come here because she had smelled something really good. She also hadn't expected him to be here. Suddenly, a voice called out to Flora in a panic, making her turn around. It was her best friend. Chuz was sitting on the ground, tears streaming down her face from fear. Trembling, she said to Flora, "I'm so scared. Where are you going?" Ludger saw this and immediately told both of them to follow him. He would lead them out. Flora watched him walk away, thinking back to when she saw him drinking something earlier. She wondered what kind of medicine he had taken and if something was wrong with him. Alisa was waiting outside and noticed Ludger. Professor Ludger Cherish, along with Flora and Cheryl, were with him. She asked him about the two of them. "Who are these students?" Ludger simply replied, "They got lost in the silent forest, so I'm taking them out." Alisa, with a more serious tone, asked, "The silent forest? Why would students be there?" Flora immediately spoke up, admitting her mistake, which made Alisa call out to her, "Flora, did you go into the silent forest?" Flora explained that she had gone in on her own, causing Cheryl to follow her. Ludger had found them. Alisa nodded, showing she understood. Then Ludger asked, "So, what should we do about Flora and Cheryl?" Alisa chuckled and answered, "Students are allowed to make mistakes. Let it slide this time." She also expressed that she didn't know what to do as the situation was quite urgent, so she had to handle it first. Ludger had just asked Alisa, "Was that magic from you?" Alisa replied, "If it were, everything would have already been taken care of. Don't worry." Ludger said, "I'll take responsibility for bringing Flora and Cher back." Alisa agreed and asked him to do so. Wolford asked Alisa, "What kind of person is Ludger?" She answered, "After this event, it's hard for me to doubt him since his reaction was completely normal." Wolford smiled and said, "That's a relief because there's no one more trustworthy than Ludger." At the same time, he asked Alisa, "Why do they feel the need to spread those rumors?" Alisa calmly replied, "They did it to lure the rats into the trap first." Wolford indicated that he understood. Alisa walked into a room where the real all-powerful stone was hidden. Wolford sighed, "The stone is really safe here. I'm glad nothing happened to it. This stone is so dangerous it once destroyed an entire kingdom." Alisa said that she had finished confirming the stone and wanted to leave. She didn't want to stay there any longer. Suddenly, a cloud of black smoke appeared in the room. Ludger stepped out from the smoke, smiling smugly. At first, Ludger hadn't believed it, but when he saw it, he felt like he had hit the jackpot. He was glad he had left a tracker on the fake stone. Sure enough, Alisa had come back to check the real stone. Ludger could clearly feel the magical energy coming from the real stone. It was much stronger, so intense it almost pulled him in. But even so, it wasn't enough to satisfy Ludger's true desire. He moved closer to the stone because he knew its power had its limits. Ludger's hand touched the stone. At least he knew it could show him the location of the remaining pieces of the holy relic. The power of the all-powerful stone radiated. Ludger felt the magic growing stronger and stronger, trying to tear into his body. He calmed it down, saying, "Easy now," but also warned, "If you go any deeper, even with my will to resist, you'll shatter into pieces." As if it understood him, the stone calmed down. He praised it, saying, "Well done." Now, Ludger wanted the stone to tell him the locations of the remaining pieces of the holy relic. After a while, the stone returned to its silent state. Ludger also realized that it couldn't pinpoint the exact locations of each shard. However, he could notice that one piece was very close by. Ludger used a magic orb to talk to Han. He was a bit confused when he heard Han's sluggish voice. "What's going on?" He slumped over the table and replied, "The thing I mentioned the other day is done. We'll push the appointment to tomorrow night." Han still sounded a bit worried. "All right, it's almost the deadline, but why do you sound like that?" Ludger lowered his face and responded, "It's nothing. We found the location of the artifact. It's just one piece though, but I may have overworked myself a bit." Han immediately recalled what had happened before. A lot's been going on lately, but if it's just one piece, it doesn't seem like much. Ludger shared some more details. "Actually, there are two pieces, but one was already known. The other one is right here in Redderblight." Han was shocked when he heard that. Ludger shared his theory. "Based on the scenery I saw for the artifact, it's probably at the auction house." He heard this and suggested, "Kunst auction house. That's the only one around here. I heard they're hosting a big event soon." Ludger rubbed his temples, then said to Han, "Maybe it's an auction item. You can check the auction list, right?" Han confidently replied, "Yeah, it's simple. See you tomorrow evening." Ludger waved him off with a quick, "All right, good job." The next morning, the sky was clear and sunny. Ludger spotted Flora standing near the door, so he asked, "What are you doing outside my room?" His sudden appearance startled her. "Huh? You're not inside?" Without being around the bush, Ludger asked, "Do you need something?" Flora hesitated and thought to herself, "What should I say? Should I ask about the special magic he used last time, or should I ask about the potion?" But just thinking about those things makes me feel a bit awkward to start a conversation. They stood in silence, staring at each other. Flora struggled to find the words, feeling unsure why she couldn't speak up. Not wanting to waste time, Ludger walked past her, saying, "If you don't have anything to say, I'll just go in." Flora was startled by his movement. "Oh, wait a second." Ludger lost his composure and asked, "What's going on?" If it wasn't necessary, then as he turned around, a water bubble was already floating in front of him, with elements of ice and fire above it. Flora looked directly at him, confidently asking, "What do you think about the spell that assigned coordinates to me?" He evaluated it for a moment before generously complimenting her. "I'm surprised. I didn't expect any student to be able to perform that spell." Hearing this, she switched to a more self-assured mode. "It's because I'm a genius. I'm the only one who can do it, so shouldn't I be rewarded with something?" Ludger responded quickly, "Yeah, sure. How about this? The highest score. What do you think?" Flora disagreed. "Just a score doesn't seem like it matches the effort I put in. I want something else that's as valuable as that highest score." Ludger was genuinely caught off guard by Flora's request. He looked at her for a moment before opening the door to his office. "Come in." She hesitated and walked inside nervously. "This is the first time I've been here." Ludger reminded her, "The lab is over here." She was startled by his words. "A lab?" He led her into a large room, filled with jars of potions and formulas written on blackboards. Flora looked around the room and immediately asked, "What is he researching?" "I've never seen these symbols before, but it doesn't look like random scribbles." Ludger spoke up first. "Honestly, I didn't expect you to be able to do it, so I was unsure about what to do. As you know, assigning coordinates is a math formula. You have to control mana and apply the formula at the same time." Flora listened to him explain, excitedly whispering, "I'm sweating, but I'm just copying what I can see." He decided to reward her. "Since you understood and managed to do it, I'll show you this." He raised his wand and cast a new spell, causing Flora to stand frozen as she watched in awe. "What is this?" A shape appeared in the air formed by magic. Flora seemed off, her head feeling like it was about to split in two. What was this sensation? After a while, when she regained consciousness, Ludger was reading some documents. He asked, "Are you awake?" She asked, "Yes, how long has it been?" He replied, "Less than half an hour." Terrified, she asked him, "What kind of magic did you just perform?" He answered, "It's called the Kleinbau. That's what I call it. I've seen it before, so I figured out how to make it myself. It was just an experiment." Flora was astonished. "You created it just for an experiment?" Ludger was concerned about her condition. "Are your eyes and nose okay?" Flora pretended not to understand. "Huh? Why are you asking that?" He gave her a quick glance and then shared his guess. "You can sense every magical fluctuation, can't you?" She was startled, unable to believe what she was hearing. Ludger explained further. "When you saw my spell formula, your pupils dilated and your fingers trembled. You must have sensed it in a way most people can't. You're probably shocked because you've never seen magic like this before." Flora tightened her grip and asked, worried, "You're not curious, Professor, about my ability?" He glanced at the paper in his hands and replied, No, I'm not interested in any special abilities, but I can't speak for other mages. You should be careful not to get caught. Hearing that, Flora felt a bit more reassured. Once he saw she had calmed down, Ludger said, "It's late. You should head home." Standing outside, Flora couldn't shake the worry. How could he stay so calm after learning about her ability? Had he encountered someone like her before? It wasn't until later, after a long silence, that it hit her. She hadn't been properly rewarded yet. That evening, Ludger went to the spot where he and Han had agreed to meet. He took one look at Han and couldn't help but tease. "Honestly, no matter how many times I see it, I still can't get used to your style." When Han heard his voice, he greeted him. "You're here already? Are you just going to stand there?" Ludger replied, "Yeah, just like usual." He glanced at the sleek black car parked next to Han and asked, "Where did you get this car from?" Han happily patted the car and said, "This is the nicest car around here." Ludger shrugged and replied, "Well, if you need it, you have to take it, right?" He looked at Han's smug expression and had to agree. "True." Han grinned. "Well then, let's go." Now they were standing in front of a building filled with people attending a party. Ludger took in the scene inside and felt uncomfortable with all the noise and unnecessary glitz. Han knew his friend well, so he wasn't bothered by it. "This place is famous. Isn't it better than being dirty and empty?" Ludger asked him, "What floor is the meeting on?" Han answered, "Fourth floor." As they were about to head up to the fourth floor, a security guard stopped them. "Wait, you can only go up to the fourth floor if you have permission." He heard this and turned to look at him, holding out a ticket and saying, "We can go in." When the security guard saw the ticket, he automatically stepped aside to let them through. "Please go ahead." When they reached the fourth floor, Ludger immediately started to assess the place. The atmosphere on the fourth floor is different. Han explained, "I've heard that underground organizations often meet here. That's why the unspoken rule of this place was created." He seemed intrigued. "An unspoken rule?" Han said, "No fighting is allowed on the fourth floor, which is why there's no security here." Ludger then speculated, "There must be a reason why we were invited here. Maybe they want to see if we'll follow that rule." The two of them stopped in front of a door. "Here we are, I guess we should go in." When Violeta saw the main figure of the meeting had arrived, she spoke up. "James Mori Arti, I'm sure you wouldn't lie here. I know you disappeared after the failed uprising in the Delicate Kingdom. What brought you here? Do you want to try again with something you've already failed at?" The one speaking was the Black Rose, Violeta. Ludger calmly took a sip of his drink before replying, "Of course not. Don't say such baseless things. I've never thought about that." Violeta condemned him. "I believe you. Why would someone with no ill intentions destroy the Crimson Society as soon as they arrive here?" He remained calm and answered, "I only deal with what's dirty in front of me." At that moment, a small, irritated man spoke up. "Enough with the private stories. What do you want? You must have your own reasons for accepting our invitation." That's Finian from the Kirukas Guild. Ludger didn't beat around the bush and got straight to the point. "Quick, to the point, I like that. I'm looking to lay some foundations here." Finian sighed. "Are you trying to build a second Crimson Society or something?" Since the beginning, Dayon from the Old Kids Guild had been quietly observing the conversation. Ludger sighed and said, "Of course not. I understand why the atmosphere is tense. First, let me clear up the misunderstanding." Dayon, who had been silent until now, spoke up and asked, "What misunderstanding?" Ludger, looking confused, said, "Earlier, I wanted to have a private conversation." Dayon was surprised. "Ha, what are you talking about?" The small girl beside him spoke up, "It's fine, Mr. Dayon, you figured it out. Mori Arti, I'm often underestimated because I'm just a kid. That's Mestella from the Old Kids Guild." Ludger heard this and politely extended his hand. "My life hasn't hit rock bottom to the point where I disrespect a child. And don't worry, I'm not planning to create a second Crimson Society. Of course, I do plan on starting a new business." Ludger leaned on his hands and spoke seriously. "I have an offer. If you work under me, I'll help you make a lot of money." Han, standing off to the side, was intimidated by what he heard. "What's he saying?" Violeta sneered, "What's the difference between this and the Crimson Society? You'll end up oppressing us and forcing us to follow all your orders." "Isn't that true?" He looked at her. "This is just an offer. If I wanted to do that, I would have already. Besides, even if you refuse, I'll still transfer a part of the Crimson Society to you." The four of them stared at him in shock. Mestella didn't understand his intentions. "Even if we refuse?" "I don't get it. What do you really want?" He explained his plan. "As you all know, my current position isn't the best for causing chaos. Fighting would be useless. I just need solid power. You don't have to believe me, and refusing won't cost you anything. But I would really like to hear your answer." Everyone in the room fell silent, deep in thought. Then Finian suddenly spoke up. "Hey, at least tell us what kind of business it is." Violeta immediately got angry and said, "Finian, why are you making decisions on your own?" Finian ignored her scolding and continued. If it's dangerous, I'm not getting involved. Ludger gestured for Han to hand him a piece of paper and assured them, I promise you won't be in any danger. Do you know how nobles like to have fun? Finian shared his thoughts. Oh, you mean opera and music, right? Don't tell me we have to do all that. Ludger replied, No, I want you to do something more refined, tell stories through drama, music, and dance. Finian took the papers with the plan and said, I can't really tell what this is from just looking at it, but you have vision. Let's do it. Ludger happily agreed. Then I'm really looking forward to working with you, President Finian. Violeta, hearing about the plan, asked, Interesting. Mori Arti, what exactly do you want? He answered frankly, I want change. Before factories and forges showed up here, this was a wasteland, just a gray sky and a dark future. But if people want to live, they have to look at the sky, right? I want to turn this gloomy place into something vibrant. Ludger knew it was time to release the sweet scent. We will also provide a suitable business model for other organizations. You should read it for yourself. After the meeting ended successfully, he and Han walked back along the dark road. Han admired him and said, Your idea earlier was amazing. You've actually got all 3 organizations to agree. He humbly replied, I just took inspiration from someone else's idea. Still, he suddenly turned around and asked, What do you want? He noticed Violeta standing at the corner of the street, curious. You don't have an escort, she said. I want to talk to you privately. He agreed right away. You go ahead, Han. Han nodded, all right. When Han left, Violeta asked, Do you really think the proposal you just made will work? He asked back, Don't you think so? She replied, The clothing market is currently controlled by the nobility and wealthy merchants. I don't know if I still have a chance. He closed his eyes and said, My potential customers aren't them. Ready-made clothes are light and convenient, something you can wear every day. If people focus on these kinds of clothes, the nobles won't be the majority anymore. Violeta was still worried, but we can't avoid their destruction. He replied coldly, Then we have to defeat them. We can't keep hiding forever. You don't need to worry about the others. If you accept my offer, I'll protect them. And when the business starts, you'll be able to use your magic on the clothes. Violeta was stunned. How do you know? He spoke confidently. A wizard can recognize another wizard even if they're nothing special. She touched the scarf covering her face, but since she had agreed to cooperate, she knew she couldn't keep hiding forever. She removed the scarf, revealing her beautiful face, though sadly it was mirrored by a burn beneath her eye. Ludger noticed the burn from magic. She quietly confirmed his guess. Yeah, a wizard with an extreme possessiveness. You talking magic, you caused it. It was too late for Hell Lumina's whole faction to give up. I've already shown you my ugly face, so I'll be going now. Before she could finish speaking, Ludger grabbed her hand. Wait. He stepped closer and placed his hand over the burn, surprising her. Because you trusted me and showed me your face, I should also show you something in return. As Violeta was still confused, she asked, What are you talking about? He didn't answer right away, but instead used magic on the burn. In just a moment, the burn on her face vanished. He reminded her, Take a look at your face. Violeta pulled out a small mirror and saw her reflection. She couldn't believe it and stared stunned. How? Ludger casually waved his hand. It's real magic. It's a shame you had to hide your face because of that scar. Hearing this, she stood frozen for a moment, then shook her head. I still feel more comfortable covering my face. You're not forcing me to respond, so that's fine. Violeta changed the subject. I'll follow your orders first. The meeting today went very well, didn't it? Suddenly, he called out her name, Violeta. She was puzzled, yes.